shark, swallow you whole. I value my neck a lot more than $3,000, Chief. Find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10. $10,000 for me by myself. For that you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
You yell shark, we've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
Mr. Vaughn, I pulled a tooth the size of a shot glass out of the wrecked hull of the boat out there, and it was the tooth of a great white.
A what?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Love to prove that, wouldn't you? Get your name into the National Geographic.
No, I'm not saying that this is not the shark. It probably is, Martin. It probably is. It's a man-eater. It's extremely rare for these waters. But the fact is that the bite radius on this animal is different than the wounds on the victim.
Get out of that Well, this is not a boat accident. There wasn't any propeller. There wasn't any coral reef. And it wasn't Jack the Ripper.
It was a shark.
I'll never put on a life jacket again.
And here we are back again for another episode of the Jaws Obsession, where we are here to share with you, prove to you, convince you, or remind you that Jaws is the greatest movie of all time. Thank you so much for coming back to this episode 75, Brody's Books. Wow, a 75th episode. Can you believe it? We're actually at this important number here with episode 75. We have a continuation of the last episode, which was episode 74, Territoriality. And this one's going to be more of a fact-finding episode. We're going to answer, what were the books on Brody's desk? What were those shark books on Brody's desk? Every collector's dream is to actually have all of those books assembled on your bookshelf, those antique shark books. So using help from a friend of the show, Andrew Currie, who is a shark scientist out of the UK, out of Great Britain, he has sent a lot of information in, compiled by himself and some others. We are going to go through the entire collection of what is detailed in Jaws, what those images we are when Brody is trying to learn about sharks. What were those images that he's looking at? And what books was he referring to to get to those images? And we are also going to learn about the word shark. Remember in the last episode, out of the antique book, The Shark, Splendid Savage of the Sea by Jacques Cousteau and Philippe Cousteau, the English language never really had a word for the animal until shark came about. Well, how did the name shark come to exist in the English language? We're going to get to that. So that's going to be revealed on this show. Also, we have a huge announcement coming up around the midpoint of this show. We now have a date for the audiobook of the Book of Quint, and that is going to be revealed. Special announcement coming up here shortly. So we have a lot to get to, and boy, oh boy, was it one heck of a month, especially the last week. I am exhausted. How about you? I'm a little under the weather here. I kind of drove my immune system into the ground, not just from work. We were hit here with a local storm. The weather was kind of rough while working on power lines. That took a little bit out of me, but then there was the big news that the 23rd of January was going to be the North American release of the Book of Quint. And as always, we have your emails, we have reviews of the Book of Quint, we have emails to the show, with some inside info about Jaws on those emails. But the topic of the day, the topic of the show, starting off here on this 75th episode of the Jaws Obsession, is the Book of Quint. January 23rd saw the North American release of the Book of Quint, and here we are to announce that the Book of Quint sells out its first printing. Yes, that's right. The first printing of the Book of Quint has officially sold out. The warehouses are empty. The warehouses of Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Walmart's warehouse, our own distributor, the Independent Publishing Group. Their warehouse is empty in North America. There are no books available. And now I'm just being informed that the last of the copies have been taken from the warehouse of Amberley Publishing over in Great Britain, over in England. So what we have here is we have a first printing that the Book of Quint that has sold out in the first 2 months of publication. Remember, it was the November 15th was the European publication, and then that went into January for the North American release. Remember, all these also went out to markets in Amazon Australia, Amazon Japan. We had European bookstores. We had all sorts of books all over. Books went out all over the world. And that's what I'm here to say, is that the Jaws world responded. And boy, does the Jaws world, the Jaws universe has a voice. It's what we always believed here, is that the movie Jaws and an expanded Jaws universe, that fans of the movie Jaws have a voice if we all stay together. And your voice was heard loud and clear, so much so that it broke the predictive algorithms that these publishing companies have in order to predict how many books are going to be needed on a day of release. I'm into analytics, as we all are. If you come to the Jaws Obsession, you only have to hear a handful of episodes. You can see how we analyze Jaws down to timestamps, and different dialogue. Throwaway lines might mean more than what you think. Whenever I encounter a new world, and the publishing world to me is a new world. This was my first novel, so this is my first take at having a novel in the traditional published sense. And I'm into analytics. So what happens is that I was watching these numbers along with my agent, Bill Pettit, the William Pettit Agency, and we were watching these numbers over the last 2 months. What was happening was, when you can look on, if you have with Publishers Marketplace, if you are a writer or publisher or an agent, you can actually subscribe to certain websites. There's a Publishers Marketplace. Even if you go to Amazon itself, Amazon will show you what a bestsellers ranking is on a particular title or a book. And you scroll down to the product details and you'll see the bestsellers rank on a particular novel, or any book for that matter. And what we were watching as the Book of Quint was rolling out, started being listed in early October, when taking pre-sales. And it was taking pre-sales, remember, it was taking pre-sales in both UK and US markets, all around with independent bookstores. We're going to focus on Amazon and Barnes & Noble a little bit here, but also with the independent bookstores, we're putting orders out. So we were watching the Book of Quint was actually coming in. Now remember, when the Book of Quint would come from, I remember back in November with Amazon US, we were in there in about the 800,000s, 700,000 ranking on the bestseller ranking. And then we started to see that number come down. Now remember, it says the number one book would obviously be number one and number two, so it would be so forth. So the lower your score, the lower your bestseller ranking is, the better your book is doing. And they have all sorts of different calculators to take these bestseller rankings and whatever market you're in to be able to kind of predict exactly how many units are being moved, how many books are being sold at that time. And what I was doing was I was watching these numbers very closely through this whole last 2 months, because I was trying to see exactly what the Jaws world was responding to. And we were watching stuff around in November time, when November 15th rolled around. We were watching the U.S. numbers, the Book of Quint Amazon U.S. numbers, drop down into the 16,000s. Now remember, this is out of 8 million books, okay? 8 million books, okay? So we're looking at into the 16,000s. If you look at any of these, from the little information I was able to gather from other authors, any book that it drops below 100,000 is doing very well in the publishing world, okay? And the Book of Quint started going down and down and down. And it would have moments where it would go down into the 14,000s, and then it would go back up into the 100,000s. But then around the end of December, it started to drop into, okay, now we're into, because people in Christmas started ordering the book. They were waiting for the beginning in line. And I can only go on Amazon US because that's all I have for the data. I was also closely monitoring Amazon UK. Amazon UK, we dropped into the 4,000, 5,000s for Amazon UK, we were in the top 100. The Book of Quint was in the top 100 for horror thriller paperbacks. It debuted at number 22. Now remember, this is these numbers update every hour. So every hour these numbers will fluctuate. But when you stand back and look at the wide picture, you can actually see the demand grow. You can actually see, whoa, this book is actually, there's a lot of pre-orders happening. To the tune at one point, we were actually, people were buying the Book of Quint off just Amazon US, 44 books a day. That's very interesting. Something is resonating here. It's building. So that was leading us up to January 23rd, the big day, right? And also those are Amazon numbers. We also had orders being taken on Barnes & Noble, on Walmart's website. Walmart labeled it a bestseller because so many books were moving through Walmart's site. We have to also look at secondary vendors. There were secondary vendors from England that were listing books on Walmart's site and actually selling them throughout this whole time. So the people that ordered on Walmart, actually many of them got a UK edition first edition of the Book of Quint, because those secondary vendors were supplying them from the UK. All very fascinating stuff, watching the metrics as they're coming in. And then January 23rd hits at midnight. What happens? The warning bells were not noticed by the publishing world. And what happens is that the demand got so huge on January 23rd, the first printing was clearly not enough. Sold out right there, depleted. Within 5-6 hours, Barnes & Noble, Walmart were listing out of stock. The Book of Quint was out of stock. You could not place orders on these sites. I went to a few Barnes & Nobles myself the week before. 3-4 days before launch, one Barnes & Noble had talked to a nice manager named Kevin, big Jaws fan. When he learned about the Book of Quint, he was very excited. He was raising the alarm that there were none in the warehouse at Barnes & Noble. He couldn't even order. He said he would have had me at a table with 100 books there on a Sunday, waving hi to people as they walked into the door if I wanted. But he couldn't do it because there were no books. There were no books in the warehouse at Barnes & Noble. But unfortunately, the publishing world it's very slow. And these books have to be thought of. They have to be ordered ahead of time. We all know that Jaws is the greatest movie of all time. And this was an extremely huge feat to actually have a prequel to Jaws with permission to publish by the Benchley family, by Wendy Benchley and Benchley IP LLC. That makes it an official entry into the Jaws universe. And here we are with the Book of Quint. And once that word got out that the Jaws universe, especially Jaws, is a very, very special universe. It's a special movie, and it resonates with millions of people around the world. And those people have special relationships with the movie, the memories, how they saw it, the memories with family members that they saw it with. If a book were to be released that actually increases the emotional connection that readers and viewers of Jaws have with the movie, wouldn't that be special? Wouldn't that resonate? Wouldn't that be something that is timeless? Wouldn't that be a book that is in high demand, i.e., a bestseller? That's what we're looking at, is the Book of Quint has all the hallmarks of being a bestseller. All the metrics that are coming in right now, that even with it unavailable, Amazon US is scrambling using secondary vendors out of Great Britain to supply books. Right now, I just refreshed, only 7 left in stock, order soon at one of these secondary vendors. They're selling it right now on Amazon US. Even though Amazon is out in their warehouse, they're scrambling to get as many books that are maybe in England listed on their site here to satisfy the demand. Amazon has put a sale on the Book of Quint to try to get people to not go to other places or to not forget that the Book of Quint is still around. Right now, currently in the US, the bestseller ranking is 23,386. 23,000 out of 8 million books. Let's keep that into perspective. How amazing is that? In the Sea Adventure fiction listing, it's number 46. It is the number It is number 3 on the new releases in Sea Adventure Fiction. I have a great screenshot of the Book of Quint nestled in there when it was in the 20s with Patrick O'Brien, Master and Commander, those type of seafaring books. Interesting to see that the Book of Quint being on that list with readers, that readers are enjoying it and actually ordering it either through Kindle or Amazon in the same scope as Master and Commander. How cool is that? So it broke the algorithm that the Jaws fans, you, the listener of the Jaws Obsession out there, you all banded together. You fanned out across the country of the U.S., across multiple foreign countries. You went and talked to local bookstores. You got the word out. That's what we needed. We needed to show Universal that this story is not the typical monster shark movie. This is something that needs to be made. And you all are making your voices heard. Right now, we have 35 5-star ratings Amazon UK. We have 30 5-star ratings Amazon US. The Goodreads, the 5-star ratings are coming in on Goodreads as well. We have reviews flooding in from across the market. Where do we go from here? I have had over 30 phone calls between my agent in the publishing world. There was emails. This episode was supposed to be done a week ago, and then it was supposed to be done 4 or 5 days ago. And it's even now, as I'm recording this, my agent calls me up, and we have to discuss, we have to strategize on how do we go about, what is the messaging? How do we go about from here? What are we going to do? Where are the books? Is there going to be a second printing? That's all these questions are up in the air. And I'm taking all of the emails from everybody that are either disappointed that they were in line, they were waiting. We had readers waiting since October for a Book of Quint, U.S. readers, and that they were told that they have to wait a little longer, that either their order may have been canceled through Walmart, or their order may have been pushed through Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And that truly is upsetting to me. I took that very, very hard. I consider myself the captain of the flagship here. That was extremely disappointing because the access to the Book of Quint was number one priority for 2023. And to me, it's unacceptable. And the publishing world runs out of books. But that's the reality of the situation we're dealing with in 2024, when there is the cost is ultra high to make the books, and then the readership is split in 3 ways: between audiobook, between ebook, and between traditional books. It is unacceptable that the situation that we're in when you run out of books. However, wow, does that show the power that we have here? When we stand as a group, we can actually make a statement. And that statement is, you defied the belief of the publishing world. Publishing world did not believe. Remember, I was told that this book could not be released in time. I was told that this book would have to have 50,000 words cut out of it in order to be published, that this book would never sell as a thriller. This book would never sell at the page count that it is. It's 139,000 words. I was told a debut novelist it won't sell. Debut novelist will not sell a book at 139,000 words. Everyone, I want to thank you for proving them wrong, that we sold out the first printing in 2 months. That's a special stat, but we were in the thousands with our first printing, and we have sold out. The publishing world has a history of underestimating special works, and it's up to the fan base, to the readership, to show that a book can resonate. And that's what everyone is doing here in the Jaws Obsession, is you are showing that your voice is being heard by getting together and standing behind this novel. And I can't thank you enough. And that's why I took it so hard that some out there have not received their book yet. And we're going to get to that. I just don't know when. I know I was just informed there will be a second printing. I just don't have the dates yet. I'm hoping it's next week. So what you have out there now is the last of the first printing. Any novels that you see that are being listed right now, I believe Blackwell's is still sending them out. Anything you see on listed on Amazon will be secondary vendors. Those are the last of the first printings. There will be specific details that you will be able to see, and I will point that out later on when we get into a second printing of the Book of Quint. And it's going to happen. There will be little details that I will show you that the first printing will have compared to the second printing. Remember that we had a 300 limited edition hardcovers that were made for the Indiegogo campaign that got this all started. And now what you have now is the trade paperback. That's the first edition, first printing. And anything that you see now is still the first printing. I did see one listed on eBay for over $100. That was insane. I actually sent that a message over to John Tedder, and I said, "Did you ever think you'd see the day that you'd see this?" And it said, "The Book of Quint, brand new, $105.69, free shipping, last one." That's a little crazy. Every day that there are none in the warehouse over at Walmart, there are no books in the warehouse over in Barnes & Noble, is a day that that the readers are being denied access to the story. Because look where we're at. We're at the infancy of something that's great here, something that is bigger, something is as big as the character Quint is himself, right? Wouldn't Robert Shaw be smiling? Isn't Robert Shaw smiling right now, looking down, seeing a book that's dedicated to him sell out of its first printing in 2 months around the world? Isn't that special? That's so exciting. I got chills on my arms right now just thinking about it, because that's what we set out here to do. If you listen from episode 1 all the way up now to episode 75, one of the taglines of this podcast, was always, let's make Jaws history. And that's what we're doing here. We're making Jaws history. It's great to see. It's great to see. I wanted to refer to the Book of Quint, if I can. And it's not a spoiler to know that Mayor Vaughn makes an appearance in the Book of Quint, right? Larry Vaughn is there. It's so funny. You write something 2 years ago, and then it means something entirely different as you encounter it later on. And that's the beauty of novels. And I'm going to get a little bit more into that detail later on. But Mayor Vaughn is quoted as saying in the Book of Quint, "Now these are all valid concerns and nice ones to have. This means we are growing. All things that happen when communities become successful. So let's keep it all in proper perspective." That's from Larry Vaughn from the Book of Quint. And how interesting is that? Let's keep it all in proper perspective. It's so apt to what's happening now. All things that happen when communities become successful. Yes, and these are all concerns this is what happens when we find success, is that we run into these little roadblocks when we're coming up the ladder. That the Book of Quint is now sold out of its first printing. If you can find a copy, that's an official first printing, and I will go on later on in subsequent episodes of the Jaws Obsession. When we get that second printing, when that second printing comes in, that will have little signs that it's the second printing. And I know it's disappointing if the stress of this last week, the worry that there wasn't going to be enough books, I wore that. It was very heavy on myself for that. I've been into this project for over 3.5 years now. I want to appreciate everybody's emails. I want to thank you for everybody's emails of support. But let me know your experiences when you go out to a vendor, or what your experience is. If you let me know here, I can always voice those concerns to the publisher, because that's what I've been doing for the last few weeks. So thank you very much. Now let's. So that was the big news there of the week with the Book of Quint. This is going to be a long episode, so please, everybody, grab your coffee or drink of choice and buckle in. We're going to talk about some reviews here. Everybody that listens to the show knows that there is a link tree in the description of this broadcast that's going to take you to all these different vendors where you can leave reviews if you have read the Book of Quint. If you are on your Kindle with the new Kindle software, you can leave a review right from your Kindle. 5-star reviews are what we look for. It's what the industry looks for. And the Book of Quint is, when you see a Book of Quint page, if you go to the Amazon page, you are met with a wall of 5-star reviews, which is I'm extremely grateful for. So I wanted to get to some of these reviews before we get into the emails. Over at Amazon UK, with the 35 5-star ratings, 17 with reviews, that's also a good little stat right there. When you have 5-star ratings, but you also have 17 reviews, if you're kind of reaching 50%, 50%, that means that there's reader engagement, that people read your novel, but they read the novel, but they also want to talk about it. They want to let people know how special it was, their experience within that novel. I always thought that was a good little statistic that not many people talk about. You can actually look at ratings compared to reviews. People want to get their words out once they read it. And so far, the Book of Quint is running about 50% with that, which is nice to see. We see over from the United Kingdom, we see Steve with the headline of his review, Jaws fan, get this book! ! A fantastic piece of work for a true fan of the movie Jaws, a prequel that is grounded in reality, the Indianapolis sinking, and fills in what happened next and explains how we arrived at the events in Jaws. The author has done his research before writing this, and it shows. It also shows how he himself is a true fan of the movie, with small details from lines of dialogue in Jaws being expanded upon in Quint's and Amity Island's history. The book is extremely well written and flows well with wonderful descriptions. A great read. Simply put, if you are a Jaws fan, this book is essential. Thank you, Steve. That's a great review there. Untitled name. This is just an Amazon customer, but a verified purchase. Says, outstanding read, couldn't put it down. As soon as I learned this prequel to the greatest movie ever made, I had to order it. From the very first couple of pages, I was completely captivated. The author treats us with so many fine details and links to the movie and ties together all of them little classic one-liners and anecdotes from the film. All the way through it puts the reader right there alongside the characters, and it pays a very emotional tribute to the heroes on the Indianapolis. The last page left me with my mouth wide open and a little tear in my eye. Thank you. Thank you, Amazon customer, for that 5-star review, for the emotional, finding some emotion in the final page. And Steve, yes, Steve from the review before, mentions the tie-ins, the small details from lines of dialogue in Jaws being expanded upon. And then this reviewer talked about the little classic one-liners. Now, there's a reason. If there is a similarity, and I'm just going to telegraph just a little bit here. I'm just going to telegraph just a little bit with what I have in store, with what I really want to do. That the Book of Quint is a key that unlocks the door to a wider universe, an expanded Jaws universe. And those little liners that we had a review in the earlier episodes where he said that it took him out of it to read some dialogue that was straight from Jaws. There's a reason for it. That's all I can say, is that there is if you read something in the Book of Quint and someone might say something in the same way another person says something in Jaws, there's a reason for it. You just have to trust me. This is all by design, and there is something extremely special on the horizon. It's there. I can see it. I just have to have the time to make it real. And that is what I want to stress, is that when you read the Book of Quint, there is much more to the story. That's why we're going to start talking about the prologue. This might be a spoiler alert, but if you have not read the prologue, just press pause on this episode, go to Google and Google Book of Quint, or go to the Amazon page, just search Amazon, go to the Kindle section of that Book of Quint Amazon page, and look up the free preview. Go to Google Book of Quint, and then look up the free preview. Google will just show you the first 10 chapters of the book. And same with Amazon. Just read the prologue. Read the prologue and then come back, because there's a couple of emails that are going to come up. I want to start talking about the prologue because there is a lot that goes on in that prologue that establishes what really the Book of Quint is about. And really that the Book of Quint is about expanding the Jaws universe. And when I say that the Book of Quint is often imitated but never duplicated, the Book of Quint, when the Book of Quint is now becoming scarce as we have sold out the first printing, watch for other works that might try to do what the Book of Quint is doing. It will never match up, because the Book of Quint, there was so much more on the horizon that the Book of Quint allows you to see. That is why everyone will need to eventually read the Book of Quint to understand where we are going to go with the Jaws obsession and with the expanded Jaws universe into the future. And that's all exciting. It's very exciting. It's very exciting stuff. That's all I can really say. But if you haven't read the prologue, please go press pause, go read the prologue, and come back. Okay, so now that you're back, we might be mentioning some things in if I go through some of these emails, and if the prologue is brought up, I'm going to talk about that. So let's continue on here. Just to recap, one-liners, similar dialogue. If you do read it in the Book of Quint, there's a reason for it. Moving on. This one review, we got to it in the last episode, but this reviewer, an Amazon customer, writes, deserves to sell as many copies as Jaws did, if not more. That's great. I love that headline. That's one of the ones I like seeing that, because headlines like that mean a lot. When you see 5 stars and everybody has really great headlines for your reviews. I just imagine Universal executives scrolling down this wall of 5-star reviews and reading these headlines, and they're actually seeing the Book of Quint as a special novel that it is. And they're reading these reviews, but they might, even if they don't read the reviews, they got to read 5 stars and then the title, the headline. So when they see something like deserves to sell as many copies as Jaws did, if not more, outstanding read, couldn't put it down. Jaws fan, get this book. It's great. It's great to see the fans coming together like this. That's what this book does. It brings us all together and it gives us a platform to make our voices heard. It's really fun. It's really fun. It's really special to see. And I want to thank everyone for putting this in. Andy wrote in the perfect prequel to Jaws, 5 stars. Having watched Jaws for the first time shortly after it was released in the UK, I have read many books which have tried to capture the essence of the story. Similarly, with all the shark terror movies over the years, they all pale into laughable insignificance when compared with Spielberg's masterpiece. So it was with low expectations that I began to read the Book of Quint. Let me tell you, this book is the absolute perfect prequel to Jaws. The author, Ryan Dacko, has clearly done meticulous research into maritime history as well as into the characters created by Peter Benchley. As a hard-to-please Jaws fan and lifetime advocate of shark conservation, I applaud Ryan Dacko for breathing new life into the gills of the Jaws universe. I wholeheartedly encourage anyone to buy this book and see for themselves what a fantastic work of literature this is. Wow. If Universal Studios, Steven Spielberg, and John Williams put their heads together before the 50th anniversary of the original summer blockbuster in 2025, I have no doubt that this novel will transform into a piece of cinematic history. Thank you, Mr. Dacko, for bringing us the Book of Quint. Peter Benchley himself could not have picked a better author. Wow. Andy, thank you so much. What a 5-star review that is over on Amazon UK. Everybody can go read it for yourself. That's amazing. Those are very strong words. These are very, very strong words. Peter Benchley himself could not have picked a better author. That's great to see. I have chills on my arms just reading that because there is so much energy that has gone into this novel. We're connecting. Everybody is connecting with it on that same level. And we all know that there's Jaws out there, but can Jaws be more enhanced by a backstory? And we found it. We broke the code. The code is there. We found it. It took 50 years, but we as a Jaws community found it. Remember, I only wrote the novel. I needed technical help through all sorts of information. Remember, John Tedder was the technical advisor. He's rebuilding the Orca down in Alabama. The information that the Jaws obsession, this podcast, actually brought to the equation, talking to all these experts, picking apart the movie while I was writing the novel. Those first 40 episodes, 45 episodes were all while I was writing the novel. And this all led to Jaws fans coming together, and it's still paying out dividends. It's still creating fleshing out characters and creating new storylines for myself and for fans' imaginations. So great to see. And yes, imagine that. We have John Williams, Steven Spielberg, Universal Studios. John Williams has not gone into retirement. He's 91 years old. He still wants to compose a great movie. Why not? Why not at this time? The little novel that could, the Book of Quint, that sold out of its first printing, just like some of those other Universal franchises, successful franchises started off with a book that sold out of its first printing right away, like Harry Potter. Can we actually capture lightning in a bottle? I think we can. I think we can right here. Some people might say I'm overly optimistic. I don't believe so, because I see the emails coming in. I see the analytics. I'm looking at the stats, and we just need the executives to do the same thing. That's it. Come on, executives. Come on in. The water's warm. Let's all get together here, and we can see for ourselves that this book is special. And fans know that the Book of Quint, there's something special here. Let's take care of it. Let's take care of Jaws for another 50 years. Thank you, Andy. That's a great review. What a compliment. Peter Benchley himself could not have picked a better author. I'm sure Wendy Benchley and Benchley IPLLC would like to see that review as well after they did grant permission for this novel to go into publication. Thank you to them for that. I still am very grateful for Benchley IPLLC to give me this opportunity. So exciting. Kevin writes in, Hooper appears to have come back from the dead. Been looking forward to this release as a 5-star review. Been looking forward to this release as Quint is my favorite character and always felt he needed his own story. So 5 stars. My only gripe is that in Peter Benchley's novel, Matt Hooper dies while in the cage. However, in the movie, he survived that scenario. So is this a prequel to the Benchley novel or the movie? Has to be for the movie if Hooper is an old man. It's a very good, enjoyable read nonetheless. Thank you, Kevin, for the 5-star review. And yes, the prologue features Matt Hooper. And that means that it is the prequel to the movie Jaws. As we all know, in the novel Jaws, Hooper is eaten inside the cage by the shark. And very different. Remember, Richard Dreyfuss had specific instructions from Spielberg on the set of Jaws to not read the novel because he said your Matt Hooper is going to be completely different than the novel Matt Hooper. We do know about the whole affair with Ellen Brody thing, and we know that Matt Hooper is like a playboy, and the whole thing is it's an entirely different character. He's a very unlikable character, and then of course his demise at the end of the novel Jaws. So I could see why Spielberg did not want Richard Dreyfuss to read that novel because he didn't want that to be in his head when he's trying to interpret the character on set. And I think to this day, Richard Dreyfuss still admits he's never read the novel Jaws by Peter Benchley because of Spielberg's direction. So yes, this is, because it features a 79-year-old Matt Hooper, this would happen to be the prequel to the movie Jaws. In the research phase, when this idea was forming, was how to handle the material. Do you make it a prequel to the novel? Do you make it a prequel to the movie? And the attachments that I have ever had has been to the movie side of Jaws. I did like the novel Jaws, but the movie side and Robert Shaw's performance is what really affected me the most. That is where I wanted to bring the prequel elements to, was the movie side, and that's why we're staying on the same page here. The novel is good for reference material and for research material into what they were thinking when writing the script. We do know Peter Benchley wrote the screenplay, the early first draft screenplay for the novel Jaws. And I don't think Matt Hooper died in that screenplay as well. Let me check on that. Let's check on that right now. Why don't we check on that? This is the Jaws obsession, so it's time to obsess, right? Okay, so here it is. I have the Peter Benchley screenplay, final draft screenplay by Peter Benchley, Jaws script, producers Richard Zanuck, David Brown, and the final one this is before Carl Gottlieb came to the show, before the Carl Gottlieb started to do the rewrites. Hooper does survive at the end of that. So it does have Brody is holding on to scene 252, Brody and Hooper. Brody is holding on to a cushion, barely afloat in shock. Brody says, Quint, is he dead? Hooper crosses Brody's chest with his left arm, keeping him up in the water. Don't talk. Hooper says, don't talk. We've got a long way. High shot the two tiny miserable heroes swimming from the debris. So that is the ending of the Peter Benchley. So Peter Benchley actually had Hooper surviving in his draft of the screenplay. So he actually made that change. So that's why I say when we are doing a prequel to the film Jaws in a novel form, we're still working with what Peter Benchley's intentions were. He knew that he wrote the novel Jaws, but when he converted it to screenplay, This version right here only has Peter Benchley with the ghostwriting of Howard Sackler. This is before even John Milius got a hand on it, because the Indianapolis speech is only a few paragraphs, about half a page. Since the USS Indianapolis part is put in there, that was by Navy veteran Howard Sackler, veteran screenwriter, who added the Indianapolis part in. And that tells us that Peter Benchley originally had Hooper surviving when he converted the novel Jaws. And that's why the prequel to Jaws with Hooper surviving still can be thought of as prequel with Peter Benchley's characters, obviously because he created the characters, but also he intended Hooper to survive at the end of Jaws, according to my original first draft script that I have in front of me here. So thank you very much, Kevin. Yes, an older Matt Hooper at the beginning of the Book of Quint. What does everyone think about that? You can let me know here at jawsob2025@gmail.com. What a prologue. That always gets some by surprise, because they think they're reading the Book of Quint, and all of a sudden you open up in 2024, exactly 50 years after the events of Jaws, because we all know that Jaws takes place in 1974 from the Brody Kitchen calendar that we've covered here on the Jaws Obsession broadcast. So what's interesting is that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to keep everything in proper perspective. 50 years, 2024. Obviously, we know the year is 2024 because the red Jeep she has is a 2024 Jeep. So little details like that are how we were able to stay on a timeline, create a timeline, and expand the Jaws universe. The reviews just keep coming in. Thanks a lot, Kevin, for that review over there on Amazon UK. Switching over to Amazon US, we have 5-star reviews coming in all across the board here. We have Jenna wrote in 5 stars, a must-read for Jaws fan. Fantastic. I couldn't put it down. The author perfectly filled in the gaps of Quint and has extensive knowledge of sharks and history. Thank you, Jenna, for the great 5-star review there. Keith left a 5-star review. He said the novel is a worthy prequel. The Book of Quint, the novel is a worthy prequel to the greatest movie Jaws of all time. The author's love of the movie shows throughout the book by the amount of detail and careful observations with each character. The novel grabs you by opening with the USS Indianapolis story and seeing the events through Quint's eyes, and the second and third part of the book are just as engaging, with the story being told by Herschel Salvatore, along with the development and growth of Amity Island. Another great review. Thank you very much, Heath, over there on Amazon US. Let's not forget all the other vendors like Walmart, where you can leave reviews as well. We have 5-star reviews collecting up over there. We have 5-star reviews collecting over at Barnes & Noble, Waterstones. Kevin writes in over at the Walmart site, an epic prequel to Jaws. Ryan Dacco's The Book of Quint is the incredible story of Quint portrayed so brilliantly by Robert Shaw and Steven Spielberg's 1975 masterpiece Jaws. This book is perfect for any Jaws fan or anyone who enjoys a great adventure story. I can't wait to see Quint's story on the big screen one day. Are you listening, Universal and Steven Spielberg? This is the story the director has always wanted to tell. No better time than now to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the iconic film. I highly recommend this book. 5 fins stars. I highly recommend this book. Thank you very much, Kevin. That's a great review. We had Eric left a 5-star review. Sails way beyond fan fiction. For any Jaws fan, I cannot recommend this book enough. It gives more backstory to the events of the first movie than you could ever imagine. Yet it stands on its own as a very cleverly written nautical tale. The maps and illustrations really add to the immersion as well. I really enjoyed my time with it and look forward to reading it again down the road. Yes, isn't that special? Isn't that special when you can actually find something that you want to read later on? And that's it. I've had a few emails already where people have read it and then reread the novel in order to process it, because there's a lot that goes on in this book. I designed it like that. Each paragraph, there's something going on in there. It should not only make you want to go rewatch Jaws, because that's what ultimately what we're doing here is we're celebrating Jaws coming up to the 50th anniversary. But it should make you want to go rewatch Jaws. And then when you rewatch Jaws in the new light, in that new vision that you have, the new insight, the new context, the new subtext that you're going to draw out after you have the added context that the Book of Quint supplies, you're going to now want to rewatch Jaws, you're going to enjoy that, and then maybe you'll go back and reread the Book of Quint. It's so interesting. You just go back and forth. Fascinating. And obviously Eric has seen that as well. So thank you, Kevin and Eric, for leaving 5-star reviews over there at Walmart.com. Let's not forget about Goodreads. Remember, Goodreads is the app site that's linked up to Amazon. Millions of people over there that are avid book readers. 16 5-star ratings, 10 with reviews. And remember, every review counts. Every review counts. Nothing goes by the wayside because these executives the executives are paying attention, and that's what it takes. So all these reviews matter. No review goes unnoticed, especially by myself. So I can actually go there and I just start firing out these stats when I talk to executives at the publishing companies. It's all about perception, and we got to make our voices heard. And that's what we've done. That's why the Book of Quint is where it's at. Sold out of its first printing, on to the second printing. Let's go over. So those are the reviews from the vendor sites. Now let's switch over to email. I am so backed up. I have to apologize. I'm backed up back into December for emails that I haven't responded to, and I want to apologize that if I haven't responded to you. I really like to respond to emails from my keyboard here at my desktop. I just feel I write better, I communicate better using a keyboard. I want to give you 100% of my attention, and I also want to communicate with you in the best way I know how, and that's better through a keyboard. With a phone, I tend to be a lot shorter with messages, so that's why I don't want to respond to emails through phone. I'm backed up all the way into December, so if I haven't written you back, please don't take that as I'm a prima donna. It's just because it's just been one of those things where I want to give you my full attention. Been so much with the work. My work is dictated by the weather, and this time of year it gets a little busier up here in upstate New York. So what happens is I don't have much time to actually sit and process these. So I do try to write everybody back, and I will respond to you. But we had some great emails come in, and I wanted to just get to a few of these. For the 75th episode. We're kind of celebrating here. And if it's, I know everybody wants to get to Brody's books. We'll get there. It's just that I wanted to take some time and just relax because everyone's out there enjoying the Book of Quint if you were able to get a copy or you're on your Kindle. Before I get to our major news here with the audiobook, I wanted to just get to a few of these emails here because everyone's got such great insight. It's just so amazing from around the world. Very great to see. And sometimes these emails bring up topics of Jaws so I can jump into the movie right now. So you might get some little Jaws information here. Let's see what we have. One of the emails I had from a Captain Jonah, a Lake Michigan sailboat skipper from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, wrote in, says, "Hello, I received my Book of Quint yesterday. I'm a few chapters in, and I find this to be one of the best books I've read in a long time. I was born in 1974. I've been a Jaws fan ever since I can remember. I've been to all the Martha's Vineyards locations 3 times already, and I hope to get to Menemsha again soon. I love the podcast, and I look forward to every new episode. I hope to see the Book of Quint on the big screen soon, either a full big-time movie or I'd even take a Netflix series. Thank you for all the hard work you've put in preserving and enhancing the Jaws universe. Cheers, Captain Jonah." Well, thank you very much, Captain. Ahoy to you, and I appreciate the kind words, and it's always great. It's always great when you have someone with nautical experience come back and say that the book is hitting all its marks with them. Like Captain Jonah said, that this is one of the best books I've read in a long time. Yes, as a nautical person, if you have spent time on the water, you will find little things in the Book of Quint that ring true and send your memories back to those moments, because that was my time on the water, and some of my personal experience are definitely enhanced and used to flesh out and to bring the events of the Book of Quint to life. It's the number 3 top seller in sea adventure fiction on Amazon US, number 46 overall on that list. At the moment, it's because that this is ultimately a sea adventure thriller novel, and it stands on its own. You don't even have to see Jaws. I've had few readers come up to me, they never saw Jaws, and they thoroughly enjoyed the book. And my response is always, I can't wait to hear what you think about the movie Jaws after you've read the book. And I'm always interested in hearing what first impressions of Jaws are after they read the Book of Quint, which is very interesting. This is always a good compliment when I see a captain, a Lake Michigan sailboat skipper, likes the book, which means that it's authentic, that the authenticity of the novel is what is attracting readers. I guess maybe that's what it is. That's what it is that other authors will not be able to, for this book to happen, it had to have been someone who loves Jaws, but also has the nautical experience, and then able to communicate and work to find details, because you cannot know everything yourself. That's what I always try to stress to my children, is that you have to go out and talk to people. You have to ask questions. Constantly ask questions. You're constantly learning. Life is all about learning and asking questions. You'll never know everything. Even in your career, my career as a lineman, I will never know everything there is about line work. I'm still learning. Even after 16 years of doing the job, you're still learning. Surgeons, doctors, lawyers, they're always learning. Every new case, they always say, wow, the real good ones, the high performers, they always say, wow, I'm learning something. I've learned something new. Every case, every little thing, I learned something about the job. And that's what it is that the Book of Quint had that underswell powering it, which increases the authenticity. It's what the Jaws obsession was based on. Can we extract more information out of this movie that's there that we all see, but we really don't know about it until we actually look at it under a microscope? And that's where the Book of Quint was born. Thank you very much, Captain Jonah, for that wonderful endorsement there. Let's move on here. Chris wrote in. I don't see where he said he was writing in from. It's always nice to know where you're writing in from. If you write me here at jawsob2025@gmail.com, let me know where you are so we can actually put a pin in the map where we have Jaws Obsession listeners and Book of Quint readers. Chris writes in and says, hey, Ryan, just started reading the Book of Quint. I always thought the story around how Jaws the movie was made, how fascinating would it be to get into the nuts and bolts of how the movie was made, from the casting and the off-the-cuff writing, the Robert Shaw drunk USS Indianapolis monologue that Spielberg had to reshoot. And of course, Bruce, so many great stories about the making. Wow. Keep it going, Ryan. Thanks for all that you do. Chris. Well, Chris, that is, there are many books already written on that. And two of the books that I will always endorse is Jaws Memories of Martha's Vineyard by Matt Taylor. You can find that on Amazon and at book vendors around the world. That is a coffee table book that has behind-the-scenes footage it's unbelievable. And that is one of my go-to sources here when trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes. Jaws Memories from Martha's Vineyard by Matt Taylor is an exceptional book. The other one is the classic The Jaws Log by Carl Gottlieb. The Jaws Log by Carl Gottlieb. And any of us Gen Xers that grew up in the 70s and 80s, in the late 70s and 80s, this book was always somewhere in our backpack next to the Trapper Keeper, because it had great behind-the-scenes photos. And I'm not talking about the one everybody, you know what we're talking. I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about the shark stuff that's in there was great and has a lot of details. With the Jaws log, that's Carl Gottlieb's notes from the set as he was writing. They were doing rewrites, and Jaws was a train wreck of a production. It was very stressful for Steven Spielberg, very, very stressful for the actors who long waits between takes, especially for the orca sequence. And the miracle that Jaws came out of this battlefield of a cinema horror show, that Jaws was able to emerge as the greatest movie that it is just a miracle, and it's a wonder. And so if you are into fascinating books on that, there are a number of them, but the two that you have to start with are the Jaws Log by Carl Gottlieb and Jaws Memories from Martha's Vineyard by Matt Taylor. What we here at the Jaws Obsession focus on is expanding the Jaws universe inside the Jaws universe. That's why a lot of times I do not talk about the nuts and bolts about the mechanics of the making of Jaws. I like to get into that sometimes, but for the most part, we talk about these characters like they are real people. We go right into the universe. And that's where we are going to be focused going forward after the Book of Quint. Now with the Book of Quint out, we are going to be expanding that Jaws universe even more. So exciting. So thank you, Chris, for writing in for that wonderful email. I have an email here from Brian. He wrote, "What a joy it has been to be on this journey with you for the past 2 years. I am an early listener to the podcast and a backer of the initial printing of the Book of Quint. 2 months before I received my hardback copy, the Book of Quint, I was diagnosed with a condition called hypertensive retinopathy. This disease is a degradation of the retinas. To treat my condition, I have had to endure over 20 laser surgeries over the past year. As a result of the surgeries, I have experienced bleeds in my retinas, which have filled my vision with blood that will eventually be reabsorbed but take some time. All of this to say that the most difficult thing for me to do for the past year has been to read, particularly black text on a white page, which is pretty much every book ever. This has been challenging for me, not just because I wanted so badly to read the Book of Quint, but because I am also a research PhD student in theology, which requires a lot of reading. I've found that it is much easier for me to read white text on a black background. In frustration, I put down the Book of Quint months ago, having only read part 1. When I learned that the Kindle edition was being released in November, I was super excited. I purchased it right away and began reading again. I finally finished the book last night with great enthusiasm. I thought the book was marvelous. It is a worthy addition to the Jaws universe and would make a great film. I must commend you on your attention to detail and obvious amounts of care and research put into the writing of this book. The initial sequence concerning the Indianapolis and the following events was riveting, especially the portions written from the perspective of the sharks. Such a great idea. The details of the building of the Orca and the shack were so fun. Multiple times I had to reference the Jaws movie to see that the details you were describing were right there on screen. Multiple times as I read the book, I could hear the characters' voices in my head. This next part was a little bit of a spoiler. I'm going to move past that. But he talks about previous reviews that he read, that the references to the one-liners on Jaws. But he thought it was a great callback to the source material, and that is exactly, it's a great callback to the source material. So he enjoyed the references to the one-liners from Jaws. However, for me, the most impactful moment in the book was the treatment of Captain McVeigh. Since seeing Jaws as a kid, I have been fascinated with the Indianapolis and the story of the crew members like so many others have been. The exploration of McVeigh's emotional torture was moving, and it brought me to tears. My wife was very confused when she looked over to see me crying while reading a book about a shark hunter. Every story in this book harkens to what we learned about Quint in Jaws in a way that makes sense. This book was written by a fan for fans of Jaws, and it shows. Thank you so much for this treat, and I can't wait to see what lies ahead for the Jaws universe. That's from Brian in New Orleans, Louisiana. Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for that wonderful. Wow, how about that? Things that we really don't think about. We don't think about the Kindle edition actually being making the story available, making the book available to readers that might not be able to read conventional print books. As Brian said with his operations, he was having a difficult time reading black print on a white page. So with the Kindle, you can put it into night mode and you can read with the black background, a white print on a black background, and he was able to finish the book once it went into Kindle. That's wonderful, wonderful to hear, and he enjoyed it so much. And I was reading that you have anywhere from 6 to 8 million books in circulation in the Amazon system. When it comes to Kindle, you actually almost double that to 13 million books that are available on the Kindle store. So that's where the Book of Quint is actually fighting with. There's a lot of competition. When you write a novel, when you write a book out there, the competition is immense. And how do you separate yourself from the pack? How do you get ahead of the herd? And that's how you do it. You do it through heart, through emotional, sheer will to survive. And that's what the Book of Quint is all about. And Brian recognized that. he actually highlighted some of these moments that his experience within the book, and then he actually had to go back to the movie Jaws to rewatch certain parts, and he saw that those details are all there. Yes, that's what's so cool, is that when you read the Book of Quint, you're actually going to pick up little details, things hanging on a wall, little things hanging in the corner. Yes, that is what we're doing here, and it's great to see. It's great to see, and I want to thank you, Brian. I want to thank you for that. Not only that review, but I did see he went over to, and he made his rounds around in Amazon and Goodreads, and he left his review over there as well. Thank you so much, Brian. Wonderful, wonderful, from New Orleans. And yes, we do have good things in store. Don't worry, the Jaws universe is going to be well taken care of by the Book of Quint. That's the key that unlocks the door to a bigger universe. Okay, we're going to leave New Orleans. Let's go all the way over to Jesse in California. Hi, Ryan. My name is Jesse from California. I'm plugging away on the Jaws obsession, just finishing Chrissy in episode 66. My only problem with the podcast is that I will soon be caught up and have to wait for the new content. Patience is not a big virtue of mine. I do have one question. First, he does have a question here about Hooper's boat on the night they're finding Ben Gardner's boat. I'm going to save that for when we have John Tedder back on the show. That's a question, Jesse, that we're going to get to. We're going to let John Tedder answer that. The best thing, however, when the Book of Quint arrived from the UK via Blackwell's, the nuts and bolts of it is simple. The book is fantastic. The prologue tore my heart out in the best way possible. Years ago, I saw a talk show interview filmed in Ireland where Richard Dreyfuss met Robert Shaw's granddaughter. She looked just like Robert, and Richard was very emotional. I couldn't imagine a better image than Rebecca and Hooper in Amity Point Harbor, and the dialogue and meeting you built between the two of them. I want to pause right there. Yes, Jesse, that is exactly that meeting between Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw's granddaughter was a direct inspiration for the events of that prologue in the Book of Quint. I actually happened to come around that story around the same time I was visiting Martha's Vineyard. And it all happened at once. And I said, wouldn't that just be the opening of the story right there? Isn't that what we're actually looking at? Isn't that what real life would actually offer? The way Richard Dreyfuss was talking about Robert Shaw, I saw Matt Hooper talking about Quint. And that's what I wanted to create. That emotion is what I fed off of, and it's what triggered that prologue. It's very interesting. In my own experience about actually being at the site in Menemsha at Martha's Vineyard in October on a sun-setting, beautiful evening with the sun setting there, and you're at the actual spot where Quint's shack was. And I had pictures from behind the scenes, and I was actually standing in the same area that Robert Shaw stood in these pictures. They still had some of the original wood there from the seawall as well as the corner store that was next door. Fascinating to me to know that Robert Shaw was on this step, or he leaned against this post. And that is just, to me, that is what I had in my mind as I wrote that prologue. It was a real life experience, and you could almost sense the history that happened on that location. The energy was very alive at that location. So that's where this book was born. I would have to say right at that spot, at that moment, with the sun setting there in Menemsha on Martha's Vineyard, where they filmed the Quint's Shark and Shack scene. That's where a lot of that inspiration for just the novel, the start of it all, would have come from right there as well. And Jesse was able to figure that out by using clues in the prologue to the Book of Quint. He continues on, I can't pick a favorite part of the book. And the reason that's so important is because the book flows so well. As a history dork, the recalling of the Indianapolis incident gave me chills. Quint's history of his naval days so fitting. It was an absolute pleasure to meet Herschel Salvatore. He became one of my favorite characters, not just in the book, but of any that I have met in some time. He tells the history and struggles of gentrification and personal grief and growth so well, I felt like I was sitting on the deck of the fishing shack with him. Meeting Larry Vaughn through your book makes his place in Jaws so much bigger than the simple screen time of the movie. And what an actor Murray Hamilton was. And of course, RSQ. Too much to say and not enough time. You took good care of that. I want to thank you for your book. The fact that it's your first novel out of the box is impressive and inspiring. Your research and knowledge, fantastic. Naturally, I'm a huge Jaws fan, but the Book of Quint is a gem on its own. I'm going to let it sink in and read it once again once the holidays are astern of us. You should be very proud with what you have penned, and I'll always be tuning into the Jaws obsession for more. Thank you for your good work all around. I can only imagine how time-consuming it all is, but please know how much it is appreciated. It gives myself a lot of joy. Happy holidays to you and your family. Cheers, Jesse. Jesse, thank you so much. What great comments, what kind words that are there. Exactly the reaction I hoped you would have. If you love the movie Jaws, you will see the love that's in that novel. Yes, it is time consuming. I have to say that I am tired, and it has worn me down, especially this last month, especially the last week. Exhausted is beyond the limits. And I have to. I was joking. I was joking with someone the other day. I said, I understand now why some authors would find their way to the bottle, or problems with substance abuse problems, because the pressure to perform, but yet at the same time you have to still market, you have to still be the salesman, you have to still be the champion, and yet you still are expected to be creative. And it's not easy. And I'm finding that out every day, that there's more aspects, more stress gets added on, more demands. My agent expects there's a lot of things. There's production material. There's emails, hundreds of emails that have to be generated with screenshots or evidence of this, or publicity material, or little blurbs, little things, little facts that you have to state and send to people through your agent. So many different things are happening. And on top of that, I do work a full-time career on the power lines. So you have to find, that's probably why there's been such a delay with these episodes going back and forth. I mean, I was supposed to have one. I wanted to do 3 in January, and that just got blown out of there. I was supposed to do one I was supposed to do one episode before the launch date, but then I was with all the shortages, and I was trying to raise the alarm bell. The hailing and distress frequency was at an all-time high. I was trying to ring the alarms there, and that led to just my mind. I couldn't do a broadcast. There's no way I could have done an episode, because my mind was so focused on the business mechanics of it all. It's nice to talk about the book as in an artistic way, in a writing way. It's nice to converse with, whether it's through your emails or even on this broadcast, or with other writers, or when I get out there and I meet other actors. And on the creative side, I enjoy talking about the novel. I'll never stop enjoying talking about the actual Jaws stuff. What tires you, what drains you out, is when your novel becomes a commodity. And you have to start talking about, like, how many units are sold, how many books are sold. And it saps the emotion, and it saps the life out of you. And that's where I have to find that happy medium where I can turn that side of my brain off, and then I can find the enjoyment there. And that's where I always come back to the movie Jaws, that there is something there that when I watch it, and the memories that flood back, but the enjoyment I have through it, that will always be there. And that's what it is all about, is the time-consuming aspect, is that you have to be able to juggle all those hats. And those days of when you could just write a book and just be like, oh, I'm the writer, there's my book, and hand off the manuscript, are over. I'm still finding little things that have to be taken care of, little errors that have to be cleaned up. And yes, and I take it very heavy on myself. But I thank you for seeing that, and for wishing me. It's all appreciated, recognizing that and saying that you appreciate it. That this episode, and all the episodes that came before it, gives you a lot of joy. I appreciate that, because it does give me joy to do these, to actually talk about it in a creative sense. this is like my little break. It's just that when I get to this, I want to give you my full 100% attention, and I can't do that when I'm in the business mechanics side. It's very interesting. That's how my brain works. I want to reserve these moments right here where we can actually enjoy and talk about the book. It's probably why I really want to talk about spoilers. I want to get right into the Book of Quint, because there's so much that goes on in the writing stage and the research, and that there's a reason why that everyone is enjoying the novel, because there's formulas that I kind of broke, but at the same time I was that those formulas are there for a guide, but there's ways of mixing it up, is what I did with the writing, in order to, in the best of my ability, that I felt that was the best way to tell Quint's story. And I would love to talk about that more. And I will, once the book comes out fully. It's out fully, but once we have, we have a few months and people are reading and enjoying the story, we will get into more details. That's why the Jaws obsession is only going to grow further from this. It's only going to get bigger, because we have now an expanded Jaws universe. We have Jaws 2, and now we have the Book of Quint on the front end of that. And what is going to come after Jaws 2? Remember, we're going to kind of have to, in many ways, we're going to have to shut the door on Jaws 3 and Jaws the Revenge in a polite way, because we're going to respect those movies for what they were, but they don't add to the Jaws universe. They do not add to the Jaws universe. So we are going to have to take those and set those aside, and we're going to have to expand the Jaws universe. Now we have the Book of Quint, we have Jaws 2, but what do we have coming up? More to follow on that. Exciting times. Thanks, Jesse, for writing in. What a great email. And he got his book from Blackwell's, which I believe Blackwell still has some books. Let's see here. If anyone is looking, remember, still 10 plus copies available online at Blackwell's. And they have their price includes shipping, delivery included to the United States. So for $19.78, you can still order the Book of Quint, one of the first editions from Blackwell's in the UK. They still have some there if you can't find them. I know it might take a while. It might take a couple of weeks to get there, but we want to make sure that you can still find the Book of Quint. So thanks for reminding me about Blackwell's, Jesse. Because remember, if you go to the link tree in the broadcast description of this episode, you will go down to the Book of Quint UK. There's a host of different links there. W.H. Smith, Brown's Books, Waterstones, Amazon UK, Blackwell's. We have a lot of emails, but we have to cut this short coming up here. But I wanted to get to Gabriel's email. Gabriel has written in, hi, I'm Gabe. I wanted to let you know that I love the podcast. The Jaws Obsession is to me the best podcast ever. And as soon as possible, I will be getting the Book of Quint. I am currently listening to the John Williams Effect episode, and I already love it because John Williams is my favorite artist ever, specifically because of Jaws. Yes, I love Star Wars and Jurassic Park, and yes, I love Indiana Jones, but Jaws to me is the greatest hit. I hope that in 2025 we will have Jaws 50th anniversary Book of Quint movie, and to shake your hand and talk to you about Jaws and get your autograph in my future Book of Quint. Best podcast ever. Gabriel sent a few emails here. He really liked the Lady of the Dunes episode and the St. Paddy's Day episode. He did ask one question here. Gabe asked a curious question. Why was Quint wearing a jacket in the middle of summer? Did anyone get that? It's hot in the summer. So was Quint wearing a jacket because he was cold-natured from the coldness of the water after the Indianapolis sunk, or was there some other reason? Anyways, keep up the podcast. I love the new episode 74. I can't wait for the Book of Quint to be published in North America. So Gabe, that's what one of the things that Jaws actually shows so accurate is that, Quint is wearing, even in the Shark and Shack scene when he's negotiating the terms of the contract with Hooper and Brody, he's wearing a sweater, a turtleneck sweater, like a heavy wool sweater. I can absolutely tell you this, in New England weather, northern New England. And I was in the Coast Guard at Station Fire Island. I spent just shy of 2 years at a small boat station there on the search and rescue stations, the 44 motor lifeboats. I was a qualified engineer on the 44 motor lifeboats and the 41-foot utility boat at the time. And I can tell you that even in the summertime, in the early mornings, it is still very chilly. It's still very cold. It's very brisk. And when you get out on the water, it's a completely different story. You might have 75 degrees, 80 degrees, and enjoying life on the beach. But if you were to sail out on the water, forget about it. You just that's where it just gets so much colder. The temperature drops. The different trade winds might kick up. Sea spray. You name it, you actually do feel how cold it can get. You never know. So I was always on the ready. When you went underway, you would always bring some sort of long sleeve shirt or overcoat or sweatshirt. You wanted to have many layers because you can always remove layers. It's just that when you don't have extra layers, life is very, very miserable if you need them. So it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. That was my philosophy through all of that. And obviously that's Quint's philosophy. You can see that he's obviously wearing that even in the early morning hours when they went over to him for the contract talks, he's wearing the sweater. You can see that even Herschel is wearing flannel shirts, and that's in July because it's on an island, especially on an island that's not the mainland. You don't have that sun baking off of the asphalt. You also have the sea breeze, and ocean temperatures and sea breezes will drop the temperature. The prevailing winds will drop the temperature around there. So even though it is summer and it is July, it can get quite cold out on the water. And that's why Quint has many layers on, and it's not a continuity error. It is not a continuity error. It actually shows the realism. By Quint having a jacket, it shows the realism of what it actually is like out on the water. Remember, Jaws was one of the first movies to actually be filmed out on the real ocean with the mechanical shark. They did not do it on a controlled soundstage in a tank. They actually went right out there, and that was proving that these guys were cold. Look at even Brody. Brody's wearing his wool shirt there, the black shirt there. It gets cold out there, and those oceanic temperatures are not very warm. And that's why, and so when you get sea spray and that hits you, that chills you right down there too. So you want to have many layers on when you get underway. When I was a child and my parents would take me whale watching out of Provincetown, Massachusetts at the end of Cape Cod there, and you get on the Portuguese Princess, or you get on the whale watching fleet that goes out of there. My mom would always make sure that all the kids had their jackets, because even though it was hot, we would all be carrying layers, because when you put the layers on, once you got out there, then you realize why you needed a jacket. And it's true. That was right off of Cape Cod, and that's in the same area. That's that same New England waters where Amity Island is. Remember, Amity Island is south of Cape Cod. It's a triangle of islands. So you have Martha's Vineyard, you have Nantucket, and you have Amity Island down there. And the map for that is included in the Book of Quint. So you can actually see the map of the actual location of Amity Island. Shows you just how it's right out there in almost to the open ocean. So I hope that answers your question, Gabe. And I want to thank you for writing in and being such an enthusiastic fan and listener to the Jaws Obsession. I wrote Gabe back and I told him the good news that we're about to break in this next part here. 2024, we have some good surprises in store for the Jaws world, the expanded Jaws universe, and the Jaws Obsession. Groundbreaking news. But first, how are we going to get to there? I want to just develop a little bit of the background here. I have an article from Deadline.com by Justin Kroll, and it says, Michael Mann eyeing Heat 2 as next film with Warner Brothers in negotiations with director to board sequel. Adam Driver in talks with Mann to play young Neil McCauley. So a year ago, I purchased a novel, Heat 2, and this is written by Michael Mann and Meg Gardner. What Michael Mann did, he's the director of Heat, which is the 1995 epic crime drama starring Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. As a director, Michael Mann, he's one of the directors that I've always enjoyed. Very cinematic, very a lot of CinemaScope, wide-angle shots. But his depiction of cops and robbers and crime underworld has been great. I remember that one of my favorite movies is the movie Thief, starring James Caan. Some other Michael Mann movies, like Last of the Mohicans, Heat, The Insider. Very famous director. And with the movie Heat in 1995, he wrote and directed that movie. So what he worked on was a sequel that's called Heat 2, but he co-wrote, using a co-writer, Meg Gardner, they wrote a novel, Heat 2, which is a prequel/sequel to the movie Heat. It has prequel elements in many of the ways that The Godfather 2 did, where it cuts back and forth between the character Chris Chiherlis, who's played by Val Kilmer, as he survives the events of Heat. And then it cuts back and forth with the young Robert De Niro coming up through the ranks of the Highline robbery system, and a young Al Pacino coming up through the Chicago Police Department in 1988, 7 years before the events of Heat. So what we have is a possible sequel that's coming out with prequel elements. But what I wanted to show that this is already the Heat 2 was a number one New York Times bestseller as a novel. Now Warner Brothers is in negotiations with Michael Mann, the director. They're now in development. So it says right here, it's been nearly 3 decades since Michael Mann's crime classic Heat hit theaters via Warner Brothers, and it now feels like Mann and the studio are finally feeling more heat around the corner for a sequel. While rumors have been swirling for weeks, Deadline is hearing that Warner Brothers is now in negotiations to come on to develop Heat 2, a sequel to the 1995 classic. The book, published in August, became a number one New York Times bestseller. Now, this is an article from April 3rd, 2023. So the book was already out in August of 2022. If you bear with me a little bit, I'm going to draw a parallel over to the Book of Quint. The article continues, on top of Warner Brothers in talks to return, insiders add that Adam Driver, who recently starred in Michael Mann's Ferrari, is in discussions with Mann to play young Neil McCauley in the movie. So a young Robert De Niro's character, Neil McCauley. Adam Driver might be signing on to play the younger version of that character in the prequel elements that this sequel has. Heat 2 was penned by Mann and Meg Gardner and is not a novelization of Mann's film. Rather, it tells the story of everything that happens before and after the principal characters. The book jumps between 2 time periods, the first following Chris Chiherlis as he tries to evade the LAPD, and Detective Vincent Hanna following the bank robbery gone bad, and moves forward into new territory in the tri-border zone and Southeast Asia. The second storyline takes readers back to Chicago in 1988 when McCauley, Chiherlis, and their Highline crew are taking scores on the West Coast, the U.S.-Mexico border, and in Chicago. At the same time, young Vincent Hanna is cutting his teeth as a rising star in the Chicago Police Department, chasing an ultra-violent gang of home invaders. The original 1995 pick, starring Pacino, Robert De Niro as McCauley, and Val Kilmer as Chiherlis, while it was a solid hit, it has since become a revered crime classic with a global following, and this development is sure to get fans excited. So what you have, Heat 2 has come out. It's a novel that has prequel and sequel elements. Now, the Book of Quint is also a novel with, it's mostly prequel elements, but it has some sequel elements as well, as you saw with the prologue that leads off the Book of Quint with an older Matt Hooper. Now, what I want to draw parallels to is that Michael Mann he's going about those steps the way I actually thought while developing the Book of Quint into a novel, is that you first, in order to get studios interested, you write the novel, and you publish it, and you show the fans actually have a demand for that story. And therefore, now he's using the success of the novel called Heat 2, as it hit number one New York Times bestseller, and he's bringing that over to Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers now is actively in development for that. That is exactly what we are trying to do here, is that we now have the Book of Quint. And this is what I wanted to show, is that it works, that this technique works. Now, granted, I am not a world-famous director that Michael Mann's name is. So that's how he was able to get, not only the book was published through one of the top 5 publishers, but it also reached #1 New York Times bestseller because he has a track record of writing very great movies, and obviously he is a very great movie. So how about that prequel sequel to Heat? Why not? Readers took a chance and actually came out pretty well. That the book is actually very excellent. It's an excellent crime drama, and that is the same technique that we are using here with the Book of Quint. I did not know this was happening until after I wrote the Book of Quint, but I just think it's interesting that I believe, and I've said this in episodes on the past, is that going forward, we are going to see more novels get published in order to get a fan base excited and attached to a project, so the executives can be more comfortable with greenlighting multi-million-dollar, hundreds of millions of dollars in production in order to know that they're going to get a return on that investment when it comes to these big studios. Maybe we're looking at something where Universal could move forward and they're actually going to see reader engagement and fan engagement with this novel. That's why it's so exciting here about this Heat 2 development, is that if you look at the 2 books, Heat 2, we're going to compare and contrast the ratings and the buzz and how Warner Brothers is handling it and how will Universal handle the Book of Quint. That's what I'm saying, is that it's a great little parallel timeline going on here. And all we need is director Steven Spielberg to step in and do what Michael Mann is doing, and basically he will be able to take this over the hill. I have no doubt that the Book of Quint will be a more amazing and a higher box office winner than Heat 2 by Michael Mann with Warner Brothers, if Spielberg should helm the Book of Quint with Universal. It's all right there. The numbers are all matching up, and that's very exciting. What that led to now is into audiobook world. Now, I have been researching, now that the audiobook rights were licensed out by the Book of Quint, I was researching exactly on audiobook and narrators and how narrators will affect an audiobook. The company that licensed the Book of Quint is Tantor Media, Tantor Media. Tantor Media is the company that licensed the unabridged audiobook rights for the Book of Quint from Amberley Publishing. They are a leading independent audiobook publisher, producing more than 100 new titles every month. They are located in Connecticut, and they work with 150 of the industry's best narrators. Also, they are a subsidiary of Recorded Books, RB Media Global, which is the largest independent publisher of unabridged audiobooks with operations in the US, UK, and Australia. So, Tantor Media now has gone into production on the Book of Quint. And early on in those talks, they contacted myself, and we discussed about narrators. As you remember in the past, when I met Ian Shaw back in November of 2022 to hand him #1 prototype of the Book of Quint off the assembly line to deliver that to the Shaw family, I did mention to Ian Shaw that I would be recommending him to do the audiobook narration. So what I did was, with Tantor Media, I was able to toss his hat into the ring for consideration, that Ian Shaw would bring a legacy attachment to this. What I'm learning now is that there are 2 types of rights that get licensed out. When a novel goes into publication, the publisher can license out, #1 is the unabridged audio rights, which is 1 narrator and just reading from the novel. Then there are the performative audiobook rights. The performative audiobook rights, that is when you have an ensemble cast. Different voices are cast for different characters. You'll have sound effects. You'll have music added in. And that's a completely different production house that will be needed for that. So what we're looking at is Ian Shaw, and people have wrote to me about they would like to see Richard Dreyfuss narrate the book. Those actors are more apt for a performative rights audiobook, where they would be performing the either just the narrator part, or they would be performing the actual characters in the book. So Ian Shaw would actually read the lines for Quint. The unabridged audiobook rights are a completely different world. Not many actors can actually handle a 15-hour audiobook. There are over 22 different speaking roles and characters in the Book of Quint. And those are characters with significant lines. There's also side characters and throwaway lines as well. So these narrators, these 150 narrators that Tantor Media works with, these are professional narrators that their living is actually working with just the unabridged audiobook rights. So their specialty is to play the part of the narrator and the multiple characters throughout the novel. So when I was doing my research, I was keeping this in mind, and I went along and I listened to the novel Heat 2 by Michael Mann and Meg Gardner. The audiobook, which was narrated by Peter Giles, is unbelievable. But what that taught me was that Peter Giles is such an exceptional narrator with his voice. He was able to not only keep the attention, but also his voice was able to, he did an impeccable Al Pacino impersonation. And if you listen to Heat 2, on the audiobook side of things, that narrator just takes you right through the novel in a gripping, that gritty crime thriller type voice. So I was able to put Ian Shaw's hat into the ring for that. But Tantor Media, obviously, I don't know if the schedules did not work out, but Ian Shaw was unavailable for the audiobook. I don't know if it was schedules or I don't know where the talks went after that. So after that, it was search for the narrator for the Book of Quint. Is there a narrator out there that's an experienced narrator, but also with passion and the ability to carry the Book of Quint? The Book of Quint is not a light book. There are multiple point of views. If you read the Book of Quint, part 1, part 2, and part 3, multiple narrative styles, multiple points of view. It's not a simple book to read. It's not just one voice. There's many different there are many different inflections. There's many different points of time. So Quint actually goes from the age of 28 all the way to the age of 51. So you have his voice actually age, get saltier and more gritty. So there's all these factors to weigh in. So my goal was to assist Tantor Media in making sure that their version of the audiobook, the unabridged audiobook performance by one narrator, one person reading the Book of Quint, was going to be some special experience, just in the way that I experienced Heat 2, Michael Mann's Heat 2. The right narrator, there's a lot of audiobook listeners. I'm relatively new to the medium. I used to read books just generally, but now I'm getting into more in audiobooks because I'm trying to learn about that whole side of the media, that whole side of the publishing world. If anyone out there is well-versed with audiobooks, the right narrator can make a book. The wrong narrator can certainly break a book. You can have a great book, but if you have the wrong narrator, it's going to lose the attention and people will switch off. And that's not what we need at this point. As we're coming up, I'm looking at Book of Quint keeping up with Heat 2. And how can we actually stay on par? So in doing that, we were able to find the right man for the job, the right narrator. His name is Jon Waters. Jon Waters, spelled Jon, not the John Waters, not the director of Pink Flamingos or Crybaby Jon Waters, but there is a Jon Waters who is a professional narrator out there. And he has done over 300 audiobooks to his name. And he is an experienced narrator that works with Tantor Media. And here we are with the announcement. The announcement that came out only a few days ago is the Book of Quint by author Ryan Dacko will be narrated by Jon Waters, and it will be published in a publication date, a premiere date for the audiobook for the Book of Quint, narrated by Jon Waters, will be March 26, 2024, with a running time of 14 hours. So that's going to be a 14-hour audiobook that's going to be released on March 26. And I want everyone to know that Jon is he is the right man, extremely huge Jaws fan. He was raised on the movie. His father is a huge Jaws fan. And Jon's first, he communicated to me that his first monologue that he memorized in drama school was Quint's Indianapolis speech. Now, isn't that the stars aligning, that we were able to find that man for that right man for the job, with the passion, with the love for Jaws? He is ready to go full in on this book. And he's recording the chapters. He's in recording right now. He's recording the chapters, but it is extremely exciting that we actually have a Jaws fan and a very talented, seasoned narrator, stage-trained actor, and he is going to be performing the Book of Quint. If you want to hear samples of Jon Waters, you go to Audible or you go to Tantor Media, tantor.com. You look up Jon Waters, Jon Waters, and you can, if you click on his name, you can hear samples of his voice. If you go to Audible, you can search Jonathan Waters, Jonathon, Jonathan Waters, and you can hear samples of his work there. And you can hear that he has the right narrators, that his I communicated to Tantor that the voice has to rise to the moment, that this is a prequel to the greatest movie ever made, that this is going to be on the level of the classic seafaring novels, and that voice needs to rise to that level. And without a doubt, we found the right voice. So I'm excited. That's the big news. March 26, 2024. That's the next date that we have to look at, is that's when the audiobook drops for the Book of Quint. Now, I always believed that was going to be the final nail in the coffin for Universal. When those executives, or when director Spielberg, driving in their car, they're going to reach up to that dashboard. Most cars today have Audible or Spotify installed right there, or Apple iTunes. They're installed on your phone and it goes right to your dashboard. They're going to select, or they're going to be sent the audiobook on Audible. They're going to select it. They're going to listen to Jon Waters narrate those first 2 to 3 chapters. And I think that's when the switch is going to be flipped. And we are going to see the option from Universal, and we're going to go see this book get put into pre-production with Universal. And that's what I believe is the next date we're going to focus on, is March 26, 2024. I can guarantee you that even if you have read the Book of Quint, I am the author of the Book of Quint, and I am excited to hear the arrangements that Jon is going to bring to the table, the energy and the cinematic picture that he is going to paint for us as he reads, as he narrates the Book of Quint. One man, one voice, one book. 14 hours. What an epic feat this is going to be. I think it's going to be award-winning, right there on level with Heat 2 by Michael Mann. I will have the link for the Book of Quint page over at tantor.com in the description of this broadcast. How great is that? Very exciting to hear. Then bravo to Jon Waters for being there for us as a Jaws community. We're going to hear more about that name in coming episodes. He agreed to come on to the Jaws Obsession to talk about the Book of Quint and his experience as a narrator for the Book of Quint after he is done in the recording sessions, which are going on right now. So exciting. It's so exciting. There's a lot going on there, and I've been actively involved in that. Over the last few months, I've been especially the last month, I've actively been involved in this whole in this arc of finding the right voice for this book. The exciting part is of 2024 is only beginning. So now what we have a sold out first printing. The second printing is going to be coming online shortly of the book. We get the audiobook being recorded right now. That's going to drop on March 26, 2024. And now it's time to build up and wait for that. 2024 is going to be exciting for us and for the Jaws universe. Okay, let's get into the Brody's Books topic of this show. I told you this show was going to be a marathon, didn't I? And here we are, because there hasn't been one in a while, so I hope that you are all still hanging in there. as we go on to the Brody's Books portion of this episode. Brody's Books. So this will be a continuation of episode 74, and I was steered in this direction by friend of the show, Andrew Currie, who resides in England. He has a lifetime of encounters with sharks, and he's has collected memorabilia, a shark preservationist, a scientist, curious mind. And these are the types of minds that make Jaws the greatest movie of all time, because it's with people like Andrew Currie that you have the information that backs up what we see in the film. When it comes to research, these are the types of minds that I like to ping thoughts off of, get their points of view. You can follow Andrew Currie over at Instagram, at Jaws_sharks_Andy. The Book of Quint follows him. And what is special about Andrew is that he was one of the scientific minds that I pinged thoughts of in the early version with the limited edition copy of the Book of Quint that led to some adjustments that were made between the limited edition Book of Quint into what you see as the first printing, first edition trade paperback that's circulating out there right now. Andrew Currie had a definite effect in the way to steer the shark portions of the book, as well as a lot of errors that he may have found. I was able to get ahead of that using his documentation that he sent me. So we can't thank Andrew enough. I was able to meet Andy over in West Houghton when we had the Robert Shaw celebration for Robert Shaw with the Book of Quint back in July of 2023. What a nice gentleman and all-around kind soul, and I'm grateful to have his assistance on this episode. So what we have is he sent in a lot of information, which I am going to sift through, and I'm going to try to synthesize that as we aim to establish what kind of books was Martin Brody reading at his desk in Jaws. And in doing so, if you felt that you wanted to get a little bit more closer to the mindset of how society and how the world looked at sharks as Jaws was being made, this will help you do that. And that's what the realization of episode 74, if everyone wants to go listen to that was territoriality, is that Jaws has gotten sort of a bad rap in recent years about being the definitive movie that caused the sport fishermen to go into mass hunting of sharks, that sharks became endangered because of Jaws. And what I wanted to show was that this mentality, the shark fear, the shark hunting, has been around for quite some time. We tried to establish that with episode 74, territoriality. And now we're back here again, maybe tie a nice little bow on that thought as we go into establishing what books were on the set of Jaws, that established the making of Jaws, but also what establishes the mindset in Brody and Hooper as they confront the mayor later on. All sorts of theories. These were the popular theories in shark books, which were very rare at the time. I have a list of 14 different books here that are featured in Jaws during these really two quick scenes where Martin Brody is at his desk before he gets spooked by Ellen. And then later on, at the holiday roast scene, it cuts back to Brody flipping through pictures. We're going to go through this frame by frame, and we're going to isolate down to what books those are derived from. So if you are listening, get your pen and paper handy. You will be able to write this down. Our show notes are still over at Telegram channel at JawsOB. So if you go over there, you'll see the show notes with images and references to the books that we are going to be talking about here. I wanted to start in with an email that I received from Mr. Currie, and he said, once again, Ryan, you have hit the nail on the head with observations and ideas about Jaws. The rogue shark theory was indeed penned by Dr. Victor Marcus Coppelson. Dr. Coppelson was an Australian surgeon and shark bite investigator. From 1926, he was the honorary medical advisor to the Surf Life-Saving Association of Australia and wrote several articles on shark bites before publishing his 1958 book, Shark Attack, a study of swimmers, surfers, skin divers, shipwreck survivors, and sharks. The first book dedicated to shark-human interactions. It was Dr. Coppelson who first used the term rogue shark in this book. So the first term of rogue shark that Andrew Currie is telling us was used in the 1958 book, Shark Attack, A Study of Swimmers, Surfers, Skin Divers, Shipwreck Survivors, and Sharks by Dr. Coppelson, Dr. Victor Marcus Coppelson. So we were right on that in episode 74, that he was the one who coined the term rogue shark. Andrew goes on to say, in the Jaws universe, it is highly likely that prior to his arrival on Amity in 1974, rock star marine biologist Matt Hooper would have been familiar with the rogue shark theory, having no doubt read Coppelson's book. The chief would also have read about this theory, as he is the one who brings up the subject. Now, if you look online, you will probably read that the first instance of a single shark being blamed for multiple shark bites were the 1916 New Jersey incidents. This is actually incorrect. Coppelson does cite the New Jersey events in his book. However, he also describes 3 separate shark bites that occurred in the same location within the space of 3 hours, 17 years earlier in 1899. And Andrew sent a couple of PDFs that I will include on the show notes, which are directly taken from the 1899 attacks that Coppelson cites. All 3 boys were bathing off the Mediterranean shore, although none were bathing at the same place at the same time. Many people have expressed the opinion that it must have been one shark which bit all 3 boys, and I think this is very likely. That's written by Dr. Coppelson. We also have a picture here of Coppelson's book and of Dr. Coppelson that I will be including on the show notes. Very fascinating stuff. So the 1916 New Jersey incidents, although mentioned in the movie Jaws, Coppelson cites was not the first instance of one shark being accredited for multiple attacks. And that occurred at Port Said, Egypt, and reported in the British medical officer Dr. William Bryce Orme. Recorded the events in the British Medical Journal dated December 2nd, 1899. Very interesting stuff here. This is probably the earliest part of having the shark paranoia. And even what Andrew Currie writes here, he says, what is interesting is the terminology used. The report itself is entitled 3 Cases of Shark Bite. No mention of the word attack. The phrase shark attack came from Australia in mid-1930s, historically from around the beginning of the 1900s. If a person was bitten by a shark, phrases such as shark bite and shark incident were used in reports and media. The most common phrase was shark accident. And even when the bite proved to be fatal, the term tragic beach accident was used. In the USA, it was generally believed that a shark would not bite a human being north of the Caribbean. As a result of examining many shark bite patients in Australia, Dr. Coppelson set out on a public service to prove that sharks do attack people. The term shark attack slowly started to replace the less dramatic terms that have been used previously, and by 1958, the phrase had firmly cemented its place into our psyche, and forevermore human beings would associate these rare, sometimes tragic incidents as more intentional than random. Now, isn't that interesting that shark attack was not used until, commonly used until the 50s. The first use of the term shark attack came from Australia in the mid-1930s. That is fascinating to me because if you think about it, like when someone goes into a hospital and they got bitten by a snake, they say, I have a snake bite, okay, or a dog bite. You don't say, I suffered a snake attack. Or there was a snake attack. You don't say, we don't use those terms like dog attack or snake attack. We still use dog bite or snake bite. We don't use shark bite. We always say shark attack. And that verbiage has kind of took over. But that was all preceding Jaws. Remember this. This is all so that the dramatization, the glorification was well apparent. If this was being used in 1930 and it became commonplace in 1951 with books as well as in the media, Shark Attack, you can see that this preceded Jaws and the writing of Jaws, the publishing of Jaws by over 25 years. So that's why we're not exonerating Jaws, but we are explaining, we're trying to put things into proper perspective here. When people say that Jaws was responsible for the shark killings, not necessarily. Jaws had played a role in it, yes, but not necessarily did it start this. So Andy goes on to say, Hooper was correct with what knowledge was known about sharks at the time. Nowadays, the rogue shark theory has been debunked. It has never been proven that any shark will develop a preference for human flesh. That is all true. And that's what happened is that if you look at the context of when Jaws was made and what Matt Hooper was working with, even the Taylors, Ron and Valerie Taylor, who became very famous for their underwater photography of sharks and were the second unit photographers that captured real shark footage for the movie Jaws. Even they at the time had a movie coming out, and it was at the time before Jaws where a lot of their great white footage was used, and that was called Blue Water White Death. So we have to look at even the shark scientists at the time were still fascinated with the potential for harm and death. The shark's reputation for that preceded Jaws was still there. Very interesting there. And Andrew Currie pretty much says what we stated in episode 74. Here on episode 75, he's tying a bow on that thought. Andrew continues on. He said, what I briefly wanted to expand on in this particular email was Philippe Cousteau's comment on the introduction of the word shark to the English language. In the last episode, we were going through the book The Shark, Splendid Savage of the Sea by Jacques Cousteau and his son Philippe Cousteau. And Philippe went on to say, and there was a passage in there that I read in the last episode, really quick, I'll just go back to it. He said, for a very long period, man was ignorant of the existence of sharks, and until the middle of the 16th century, there was not even an English word to designate this species. The Spanish word tiburon was currently used. So what Andrew's saying is, what were the possibilities and the theories of how the word shark became the term of our toothy friends that we like to study nowadays? This is fascinating. So Andrew supplies, I'm just going to start reading some of this information here. He says, one of the earliest uses of the term shark to denote the fish apparently occurred when sailors from the second expedition of the 16th century English seaman, Sir John Hawkins, returned to London in January 1569. Wow, 1569. Until then, sharks had been referred to by sailors and fishermen as sea dogs or dogfishes. But Hawkins and his crew referred to the animal as shark with an E on the end, quote, S-H-A-R-K-E. That's how they wrote it. So the question is, where did the sailors come up with this name? One of the most intriguing suggestions, and one which I personally think makes sense, is the theory that the word may have derived from the Yucatan, the Mayan word, shock, pronounced shock, which and if you see the Mayan word written, it's X-O-C. This is all fascinating stuff. There's a great article that fleshes all of this out. So this is the very abbreviated version for the show, but we're going to have the PDF on our show notes so everyone can go over there and read the full version. It's fascinating stuff. But what Andrew is saying is that the theory that it was derived from the Yucatan, which was a Mayan word, pronounced shock. Andrew says, I first read about this suggestion several years ago in the book The Private Life of Sharks by Michael Bright. To support the idea that shock means shark, Mayan arrows that have shark teeth for points are called Shak Yi Halal, and Shak Uyab Shak is the mighty Maya god of fishing and fishermen, who would not hesitate to attack any fisherman who accidentally fell overboard. During Hawkins' voyage around the Caribbean, he and his crew engaged in a battle with the Spanish on the western side of the Yucatan, which resulted in many bodies being strewn into the sea. It is not improbable, just like the USS Indianapolis, that the bodies of the dead and those wounded or still alive may have been set upon by sharks. Bearing in mind there was no English word for a shark, the Spanish word tiburon, as well as the Mayan shock, were most likely employed. If you can imagine a sailor shouting out an extended warning of an approaching dorsal fin headed towards a crewmate in the water, you can see how shock could easily be transformed into shark. Boy, it makes me sound like I'm from Boston, right? Because I think they still say that instead of, they say shock, right? Not too far in the yard, not too far from the car. So it's almost like that word's still used in Boston, shock. So you can see how shock could easily be transformed into shark. In June 1569, 6 months after Hawkins arrived back in England, a large fish was caught by fishermen in the Straits of Dover. It was transported up the River Thames and displayed in London. A newspaper describing the strange fish described the animal in detail, adding, "There is no proper name for it that I know, but that certain men of Captain Hawkins doth call it a shark." The theory that shark derives from shock is dealt with in great detail in the 1983 paper, The Shock, the Shark, and the Sea Dogs, an historical encounter. And then he attached the PDF, which I will include on the show notes for this episode. So you can go read that paper. It's excellent history there, and it ties it all together. So now we have learned the origin of the word shark. So fascinating. Comes from the Mayans. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that we'd be learning so much just by analyzing the greatest movie of all time, Jaws? Andrew Currie sent me his Brody books, the Brody shark books used in Jaws files. Andrew also gives credit to 2 other UK gentlemen, Colin Garrett and also Dan Carver. Dan Carver, if you can remember, was a guest on the show for episode 64, Quint Inspiration, where we discovered the real-life inspiration for Quint's USS Indianapolis speech. When these gentlemen donated, Andrew donated a book to the show here, Sharks, Unpredictable Killers of the Sea by Thomas Helm, and the fascinating discovery. One of my favorite episodes of this entire series was episode 64. Fascinating discovery. That's Dan Carver. We also have Colin Garrett and Andrew Currie. They put their minds together and they went frame for frame through the movie, and they were able to create these files where we actually have images of every cover of books that were used during this scene. What is a fascinating image that's going to be on our show notes as well is the close-up of Brody's desk just after Ellen scares him. These gentlemen actually superimpose the titles of the book and arrows pointing to each of the books as you go down. So you go to our show notes, you can see this nice JPEG over there, and that's going to give you the lay of the land of what I'm going to be talking about. If you look at Brody's desk, these are the books that are stacked up on the back there. The Sharks, Splendid Savage of the Sea by Jacques Cousteau without the dust jacket. Now, this is what's very interesting, is they had multiple, they had a couple of books here. They had the Shark, Splendid Savage of the Sea with the dust jacket and without the dust jacket. So Brody has the same book there, and most likely this was done to make it look like there are more books, or this is maybe he thought that this was the different book when he went to the library and was grabbing whatever he could, or at the local bookstore, and what happened was he grabbed 2 of the same book, which is very interesting. Secrets of the Sea Reader's Digest, Discovery and Exploration, 1971. We have The Living Sea by Captain Jacques Cousteau with James Dugan. Natural History of the Sharks by Thomas H. Lineweaver III and Richard H. Backus. We have The Search for the Great White Shark, Blue Meridian by Peter Mathiasen, hardback. Danger in the Sea by Alec Fraser Bruner. Sport Fishing for Sharks by Captain Frank Mundus. Remember, Captain Frank Mundus was one of the inspirations for Peter Benchley to write Quint into the original novel of Jaws. He had a book called Sport Fishing for Sharks. That's also on Brody's desk. We have Sharks and Rays by Spencer Wilkie Tinker and Charles L. DeLuca. And then we have the famous National Geographic Volume 133, number 2, February 1968. That can be seen right on Brody's desk underneath the book that we see him reading that he closes after Ellen scares him. So let's go through this frame by frame. We're gonna start the movie really quick here. So it starts off at 22:35 point in the film when Brody starts to look at his shark books. The first image we see is the drawing of the shark lateral line, homing in on a fish in distress. And then we have one of Spielberg's dogs over on the couch. We talked about that in episode 62, Jaws Dogs. So that's Mr. Spielberg's dogs over on the couch. The shot of the fish in distress is taken from National Geographic magazine. When the scene cuts to Ellen approaching Brody, the book he is leafing through is actually Sharks and Rays by Spencer Wilkie Tinker and Charles L. DeLuca. In this scene, we can see all the shark books that are stacked up on Brody's desk. So here comes Ellen.
Oh, God. You scared me.
You know, Ellen, People don't even know how old sharks are. I mean, if they live 2,000-3,000 years,
Martin.
they don't know.
Enough.
Okay, so he closes the book and then he pulls another book off of the top of the desk when he's talking about when he's frustrated and he's talking to Ellen. Andrew writes that book that Brody reaches up to grab from the top right of his book pile is called Danger in the Sea by Alec Fraser Bruner. The front of the dust jacket shows a picture of a white shark with its mouth wide open and was no doubt used for dramatic visual purposes. Ellen takes the book from her husband and keeps hold of it.
Hey, Mikey really loves his present.
Where is he?
At 23:32, when Ellen says Mikey really loves his present, Brody reaches for another book. As he pulls the book towards him, we see enough of the dust jacket cover to identify this as Sport Fishing for Sharks by Captain Frank Mundus and Bill Weisner. So there's the Frank Mundus book that Martin pulls towards him when she says Mikey really loves his present.
Sitting in it.
Good. All right, Michael, out of the boat!
23:45, when the chief is rushing towards the balcony to shout at Michael, we see Ellen carrying the book she took off Martin, Danger in the Sea. However, when she opens up the book, we see the image of the 1953 painting by Paul Calle of the white shark ramming the boat. And a little side note here that the Paul Calle painting, that was a real attack that occurred on July 9th, 1953, off Fort Chew on the southeastern coast of Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia, Canada. Commercial fisherman John D. Burns, with companion John McLeod, set out daily in his dory to harvest lobsters. Many dories dotted the sea in their quest for the prized crustacean, but only Burns had a white painted hull. For nearly a week, the white-hulled dory was followed by a large shark after leaving the harbor. Day after day, the other fishermen watched in disbelief as the shark stalked Burns and McLeod's dory from behind, just as an African lion on the savannah might stalk a Thompson's gazelle. No sooner would their dory put out to sea than a large dorsal fin would appear astern of the boat. Then, as the dory sailed alone, on July 9th, the shark charged, smashing a 20-centimeter hole through the bottom of the boat. Burns and McLeod were thrown violently into the sea. Tragically, Burns was unable to combat the heavy seas and drowned. McLeod, however, was rescued hours later, clinging cold and forlorn to the hull of Burns' damaged dory. The shark did not return after its initial and only strike against the boat. After the boat was retrieved, an incriminating tooth fragment was removed from the hole in the dory's hull. Ichthyologist William C. Schroeder of the Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard University identified this tooth fragment as having been lost by a white shark about 12 feet, approximately 4 meters, in length and weighing 1,100 to 1,200 pounds, or 500 to 550 kilograms. So that's the history of the shark painting that Ellen looks at.
Michael! Did you hear your father? Out of the water now! Now!
Now that scene always got some laughs. Every time I saw Jaws in the theaters, that scene always gets some laughs. What's interesting is this is the first instance that we see. The book she's looking at does not include this painting, and that is not what she would be looking at in that book. So that painting was used, a creative way of Verna Fields to edit in that painting at that time to make it look like Ellen was looking at that in that book. But it's a great painting, very effective, and it also foreshadows the Ben Gardner attack, right, on the boat and finding the tooth in the hull. That's why Jaws works so well. It uses classical art, and remember, the classical art, it's depicting an actual part of reality, that there was a white shark that attacked a small boat and one fisherman drowned. So then they found a tooth in the hull. So what's always interesting about Jaws is that there is a little bit of reality. There is a little bit of lateraling over to real life that's in this fantastical movie, in this other world that we call the Jaws universe. Fascinating. I love this. It's an alternate reality in a way.
Can't we go home?
Okay, at 25 minutes and 24 seconds, immediately after we hear the line, "Can't we go home?" if we go frame by frame, the first image, as Brody starts to flip through the pages, is from National Geographic magazine, page 257, And the next image of the text is from page 255. And I do have this. You can still find this National Geographic for sale around on the internet. There's always a number of them that show up on eBay. That's where I got mine. 257 is an image of the oceanic white-tip shark, which plays a much greater role in the Book of Quint. We see that really fast, frame by frame, and Martin flips over from 257, page 257 and the next image is a text from 255. As the page turns on the left of the screen, on page 250, there is a fleeting image of the head of renowned shark scientist Dr. Perry Gilbert. Oh, interesting. Yeah, very quick. Very quick. You have to really catch that, and you actually get to see Dr. Perry Gilbert there. Then when we turn to the image of the white shark on the bait, so that's the underbelly of a great white shark, and it's clamped onto a bait line. And it says, in the film, this is a landscape shot, but in reality, it is in portrait mode. Peter Lake took the photograph from a cage during the 1969 filming of Blue Water White Death, which was released in 1971. The thick black line you see at the bottom of the photograph is actually a vertical bar from the shark cage. The only publication I have with this photograph is Killer Shark by Carol Devaney, which was published in 1975. The shark on the bait is a still from the superb documentary that he was talking about. So he has a footnote here. He says, between us, he's talking about Garrett, Dan, and himself, that they hit on the idea that these two photos, the great white here on the bait line, and then the eyebrow, they call it the eyebrow porker, which is the shark with an eyebrow, like a black line eyebrow above its eye, that those two photos may have been added into the film after it was released at some point and may not have been in the original cut that was seen at the cinemas in the early days. He says it's just a theory that I happen to agree with, and not totally impossible that there is no way to confirm this. And there's an interesting little Hooper reference there. Alternatively, the photo with from Blue Water White Death may have been circulated in promotional magazines throughout the USA prior to the release of Blue Water White Death and used in Jaws. So some of these stills were promotional images for Blue Water White Death that he's flipping through right here at 25 minutes and 21 seconds into the movie. So these are the two photos that they can't really pin down being included in a book or magazine of some kind during the filming in 1974. But as we saw with the painting earlier, is that Verna Fields, she's the reason why she won an Oscar for Best Editor on Jaws, because when he's flipping through these pages, it looks like he's flipping through one of the same, maybe the same book, but these are multiple images extracted from other sources, and it looks all like it's in the same book. This is why Verna Fields was such a gem and one of the major forces behind making Jaws the greatest movie of all time. Let's move on here. He says, Brody continues flicking through the next pages, which are all from Shark Silent Savages of the Sea. So it goes to a close-up of Brody. The next image we see is the guy with the dead white shark lying on its side. The camera pans down. It's a black and white photo. This picture is from Sport Fishing for Sharks by Frank Mundus. The image appears next to page 176 and is a photograph of Durban shark fisherman Mike Titelstad with a 1,232-pound blue pointer shark he's caught. Blue pointer is the old South African name for a white shark. The photograph was taken by Reg Harrison from the Durban Shark Angling Club. Very interesting, yes. And Spielberg would have chose these images specifically because it is now foreshadowing on just what monsters lurk beneath the water. And that's what's doing to the audiences. They're going, what are we going to see eventually? We haven't really seen the shark at all, but we've seen the destruction that the shark leaves behind, but now we're getting images of large triangular teeth and the size of what these animals can grow to. So Brody continues to flick through the book. Back to Brody. Now we pause here. We have the snorkeler with her hand on what looks like a sand tiger shark, as they are sometimes called, and we see more pages from Shark Silent Savages of the Sea before he flicks onto page 257 of the National Geographic. The caption reads, Daring Woman Diver. Van Layman pats the back of a 9-foot gray nurse shark captured off Australia's east coast. This specimen has survived for 4 years in an aquarium at Tweed Heads, New South Wales. A close relative of the smaller Atlantic sand tiger, the gray nurse may reach 15 feet in length. Some shark experts consider it a dangerous species in Australian waters. Others believe it undeserving of such a reputation. A diver, Miss Van Lehman, and she is snorkeling in an aquarium at Tweed's Head, New South Wales, with her hand on the 9-foot gray nurse shark. And then he continues to flip through here. He said the next pages are still from National Geographic. Then we focus on page 228, which is Ron Taylor's famous picture of the white shark. And there it is. Ron Taylor's infamous picture of the white shark, which I always loved the story of this. The caption here is, "Rapacious ruler of the jungle deep, the great white shark is often called simply man-eater." Leaning overboard from an Australian fishing boat and submerging his camera, Ron Taylor made this rare portrait of a 12-foot great white. Bait line dangles beneath the vessel at the right. So it's a great photo, and this photo was everywhere back in the early 80s when I started reading shark books. And what a famous photo! And he just dunked his camera over the side of the boat and got this picture. It's a really cool story. Let's note there that even this National Geographic calls it a man-eater, calls this shark a man-eater in the description for this photo. Remember, this is from 1968, before Jaws was even written, that these sharks were considered man-eaters. 25 minutes and 35 seconds into the movie. Page 251 of the National Geographic, with the picture of a dusky shark with a bite meter in its mouth. Was this picture added later? The reason I think this was added after the explosive finale of the film is because the camera holds for quite a few seconds and the viewer subliminally registers a shark with what looks like a scuba tank in its mouth. When Brody throws the scuba tank into the shark's mouth at the end of the film, something in the back of our mind recognizes some sort of familiarity with that scene, as we have seen or think we have seen this somewhere before. Andy says he could be wrong, but Andy, I don't think you are. I really think that Andy is onto something. This is how brilliant Steven Spielberg was in choosing imagery and using foreshadowing, the events that are going to be coming up. This image, I would have to imagine that Spielberg thought himself that this was a scuba tank when they were talking about throwing the scuba tank into the mouth of the shark, because in Peter Benchley's treatment and in Peter Benchley's book and in Peter Benchley's screenplay that he turned in, the shark did not, there wasn't any explosion. The shark either drowns by being tangled up in barrel lines. The scuba tank explosion was not made up until later on with the multiple rewrites that were happening. This is a very famous photo, and a lot of people, including myself for many years, thought, hey, was that a scuba tank? For many years, I was just like, that's a gigantic shark. And also, it's very, very interesting, the size of its pectoral fins and the size of its dorsal fin over the head. It kind of mimics Bruce. It kind of mimics Bruce. The colors are right there. But what it is that's a dusky shark. And I will read the description right here from the National Geographic. It says, the power of a shark's bite measures in tons, not pounds, as Dr. Perry W. Gilbert discovers in tests conducted at the Lerner Marine Laboratory. One of the world's foremost shark authorities, Dr. Gilbert, uses a bite meter, a cylinder containing an aluminum core of known hardness enclosed by 4 quadrants of steel. 12 stainless steel bearings lie between the 2 layers. Bait wrapped around the device attracts the sharks like the 8.5-foot dusky in the image. It clamps down hard on the apparent meal, then releases the unpalatable offering. Knowing the force needed to dent the aluminum core, Dr. Gilbert estimates the dusky's biting pressure at approximately 18 tons per square inch. And it shows that this bite meter is only about maybe a foot and a half long. They have it tied inside a dead fish. So what you're looking at is only an 8.5-foot shark, but isn't that a dusky shark? But isn't that interesting? That should that have been a miniature scuba tank, that's when you play with the scale of the shark using smaller visuals. And we do know that Ron and Valerie Taylor were down in Australia, and when they had 12-foot great white sharks, but to make them look 25, they used everything half scale, which was a smaller shark cage with a smaller actor doubling for Richard Dreyfuss inside. That was their plan, was to get a 12-foot great white to look 25 feet by showing everything half scale. And that's kind of what this image does. If this were to be a scuba tank, all of a sudden that's not an 8.5-foot shark anymore. Now that's a 20-footer. Very interesting. That photo is very important. And we're at 25 minutes and 37 seconds into the movie. The dusky shark photo with the bite meter in its mouth is very, very important. And I have received multiple emails before asking about this image, because this image, and as Andrew says, it holds on this image for a little bit longer than the other photos. And that is precisely done by Verna Fields and Steven Spielberg in order to embed that into your mind that this is a possibility, something cylinder going into a shark's mouth and biting down. If I can remember correctly, I want to say the early treatment, the early idea was the shark was going to bite down on the scuba tank and it was going to explode. So could this have been put in there as they were working that out about biting down on a scuba tank? And I remember Peter Benchley had a big problem with that, said that that's not what would happen. The shark's not strong enough for that. So very interesting that all these discussions were going on, and this image, I think, would have led to what we know as the ending to Jaws. So I believe Andrew is very right that they actually went back and said, let's put that image in, or let's hold on that image longer in the Brody book scene in order to foreshadow what's going to be happening later on. And in doing that, you now increase the plausibility. You give the audience plausibility with what they're about to see later on in the movie. That's how really well-made movies work, is they're constantly working to give the audience the information in order to make the ending or events that are going to be coming up, in order for you to be able to suspend your disbelief and actually believe and be gripped in what's happening in that movie. Fascinating. This is all fascinating stuff. So that's the famous dusky shark image from page 251 of the February National Geographic 1968. The next page over, if you're going right to left, green flag signals safe seas for bathers at Queensland's Greenmount Beach. When the tower watchman sights a shark, he rings the bell and raises a red and white flag. Some beaches also send spotters aloft in planes to combat the shark menace that plagued its populous east coast. Australia began laying nets in 1937. Not a single fatality from shark attack has occurred at a meshed beach. So that's the description for this shark spotter tower. And we do know that comes into play later on in Jaws 2, that they use the shark spotter tower with the bell, with the alarm bell, in Jaws 2. Very fascinating. So that image actually foreshadows, if you watch this, it foreshadows, ties in right with Jaws 2. So we're still staying with the National Geographic magazine. After the shark spotter on the beach, we go to page 247, and that's the blue shark biting into a dead porpoise. This photo was taken by Peter Gimbel. As well as being involved in the direction and production of Blue Water White Death, Peter Gimbel was part of the underwater photography team in the documentary. The caption for this one, this is actually a dead porpoise where a blue shark is feeding on it, and you see those crescent-shaped gouges being or bitten out of it. Ripping out ham-sized bites of flesh, a blue shark shreds a dead porpoise off Montauk Point, New York. Photographer Peter Gimbel, submerged in an anti-shark cage, witnesses the carnage. Quote, the jaws opened so wide they seemed actually dislocated, he remembers. With wild, vicious shakes, the blue tore loose 10-pound hunks. Now it gets interesting as Brody continues to flip. Now he's changed books. Now he has gone over to Shark, Silent Savages of the Sea, which he had 2 copies of on his desk. And this was the one by Jacques Cousteau. We covered this book we read from in episode 74. But here Brody continues going through the pages. Then at 25:53, we see at the top left corner of the page that it is page 126 from Sharks, Silent Savages of the Sea. He says this frame has no dust jacket. This can be seen by the blue coloration of the book. On the left-hand side, if there was a dust jacket, the color would be white. And he is right, because my book that I'm holding right now, it is a blue-bound book with the silver printing on the edge, Sharks, Splendid Savage of the Sea, and the dust jacket is white. So they removed the dust jacket for this, for the filming of this, so that's why the edge is blue. The next main photo we see is the Megalodon jaws with the 6 scientists, right there. Now, this is what we know. The book is still Shark, Silent Savages of the Sea, as on the right-hand side, we see the words Philippe Cousteau. On that page from Shark, Silent Savages of the Sea is from Chapter 8, page 125, titled The Island of Daraka. So there is no text alongside or underneath the Megalodon jaw photograph. It could simply have been placed into the Shark, Silent Savages of the Sea book, or it could be from Shadows in the Sea by Harold W. McCormick. Tom Allen and Captain William Young, 1963, page 212. This photo could be widely available elsewhere, but it definitely can be found in the book published in 1963. So what happened here is that they have a copy of Jacques Cousteau's book. They spliced in the Megalodon photo with the shark scientists all sitting in the Megalodon jaws. But that is not in this book, is not in the Jacques Cousteau book. So they put that in there just for cinema purposes. So that's why this is a well-constructed ballet of shark imagery that we are seeing to make it look like Brody is just thumbing through a book or a few books, and these are actually pictures that are referenced in many books. As we progress, frame by frame, there are more page flickering, and we see a glimpse of a photo of the upper top right page where it looks like a beach scene. And yes, so he's still staying with Shark, Silent Savage of the Sea. That's page 127. It's of the island's lagoon on the island of Daraka in the Red Sea, where the crew of the Calypso made their base camp for a while. Brody continues to flip through, and he turns the page onto the photographs of the shark bite. On the upper left page, we can only see a very small part of the injury to the upper right flank of Michael Healy. Michael Healy was bitten by a shark on Saturday, the 30th of April, 1960. Amamzimtoti Beach, about 26 kilometers southwest of Durban, South Africa. The text below this image is from Shark, Silent Savage of the Sea, page 158. On the right-hand side are 2 photographs of Michael Healy 6 months after he was bitten, showing his recovery and how the wounds have healed. These images are from About Sharks and Shark Attack by David H. Davies, page 112 and 113. So if you're a collector, you have to get About Shark and Shark Attack by David H. Davies to get these photos of Michael Healy's attack. And it's very interesting. I'm seeing that they actually used parts of the book and they actually printed them and then glued them in. If you freeze on this frame, this was made by the Jaws art department, obviously, to make it look like this is an actual book with these photos. They actually glued in captions under the photos to make it look like an actual that there's actually part of the book. But these photos are not in the Jacques Cousteau book that Martin is flipping through. The final image that Brody turns to is a photograph of a shark bite victim. Right there. Very sad. Barry Wilson, shark bite victim Barry Wilson. This photo is from a book called Dangerous Marine Animals by Bruce Halstead, MD. 17-year-old Barry Wilson was fatally bitten by a shark on Saturday, 7th December 1952, while swimming near Pacific Grove, California. The text we see on the left-hand side of the screen is once more from Shark, Silent Savage of the Sea. So this is another photo that was spliced in there, and this young man passed away from his injuries. 17-year-old Barry Wilson, and that's from 1952 when he was fatally bitten Saturday, December 7th, 1952. So what we are looking at is he did not survive those injuries. Adding to the creepiness factor of Jaws, which is deals a lot with the passing on around the ocean and the dangers that happen when you are in the ocean. So that photo was always one that got winces and groans from the audience. I imagine back in 1974 that you were not used to seeing actual autopsy or crime scene photos like that in your feature films for your summer movies and in drive-ins around the country and around the world. Just this one image at 25:58, at 25 minutes and 58 seconds into the movie, Jaws is already doing things that normally movies do not do, especially big budgeted Hollywood movies. But I never knew the history of this photo, and now we know that man laying there, his name was Barry Wilson, and he passed away from those injuries on the leg. And then it goes right into the inner tube of the tire, twitching in the water, indicating that the men have a bite on the holiday roast. What a moment. We just went through all the books featured in the film Jaws on Brody's desk, and we also went through frame-by-frame analysis of all those images that we see in this scene. So should you want to collect these books, there is going to be a full list posted on our show notes. In doing that, we also can see the manipulation of the actual shark books by compiling. Back in the day, they did not have digital transfers or anything like that. You actually had to cut out the images and you had to paste them in a book to make it look like it was the same book. And that's what they had to do on Jaws, on the set of Jaws. Great to know, great to learn. Wow, what an episode. This is probably going to break records for the longest episode of the Jaws Obsession. And I'm glad you're still with me here because we have a couple of special announcements. Now that this episode was recorded, parts of this episode were recorded as far back as 2 weeks ago. That's why this is such a mega-sized episode, because we did not get to any of those episodes for the rest of January. So, but we do have some updates and some special announcements. Let's get some music here. So just remember that all the book covers and that we were talking about, these books right here, are also going to be over at our show notes, so you can see all the covers of the books that we just mentioned. Special thanks to Andrew Currie for sending over this information and making Jaws episodes, or making the Jaws Obsession, episode 75, just exceptional, and being able to kind of stamp the episode 74 in what we were trying to do with territoriality was analyze the shark literature at the time that was available while they were writing Jaws. Okay, so I just learned only a few days ago that a second printing for the Book of Quint has been started, and it will start to make its way into the world next week. So it takes about 7 days to get that second printing finished. So right now, if you are looking for the first printing of the Book of Quint, the trade paperback, those are what you will find right now. If you go out to your vendors, I know that the secondary vendors have been listing them. You can find them on Amazon. Barnes & Noble is back to listing the Book of Quint, so you can actually buy it through Barnes & Noble. The local distributor was able to find more books. So that's the last remnants of the first edition, first printing are still out there. The second printing will start filtering through the world starting next week. So make sure you get out there if you want to collect that first edition, first printing. Now's the time to do it. Last week, I was able to visit Rock Fox Recording in Rochester, New York with Scott Fitzgerald. He invited me onto his show, and it was a great time. His podcast, Positive Blatherings, which is also a video cast, that was 1 year after our last show together, which was a big difference, a whole big difference that a year makes. And it was great talking to him about that. That is going to premiere on February 16th. So be on the lookout for that. If you stay in touch with us over at Instagram, over at Book of Quint, over at Instagram, I will keep everyone up to date on that.
Show me the way to go home. I'm tired, I want to go to bed. I had a little think about it all.
And there we have it. Now we finally got the guys taking us out, showing us the way to go home. That's going to be episode 75 is in the books. What an episode. Took a while to get this one down. Glad you're still with us on this. The movie Jaws is copyrighted property of Universal Studios. Any references and sampling from the movie Jaws in this episode is intended to fall within Section 107 of the Copyright Act. The copyrighted materials are fairly used for the purposes of criticism, comment, reporting, teaching, and research. The materials used here are protected by the fair use guidelines of Section 107 of the Copyright Act, all rights reserved to the copyright owners. Be sure to go back to our show notes to get the list of those books and to see more. You can read more about what I was referencing over there. Show notes, remember, are over at Telegram, our Telegram channel at JawsOB. Once again, we had a sold-out printing. I want to thank everyone for coming together to make that happen. The sold-out first printing of the Book of Quint. How exciting is that? And then we have the announcement. If you go to the link for Tantor Media, we now have a date, March 26, 2024. Is going to be the premiere of the audiobook. And I can assure you right now, the experience of listening to this with Jon Waters taking us through the novel is an experience unlike anything that you will ever hear. Even if you've read the book, it is an entirely new experience to hear it performed the way Jon is doing it. I'm very excited, and I can't wait to have him on the show to talk about that process that we have been going through, and then also that will be exciting buildup. That will be an exciting buildup to that date. So with that, I want to thank everybody for hanging with us and for continuing to enjoy the greatest movie of all time, Jaws. Thank you very much. Until next show, farewell and adieu.